In the early years of the 19th century, America stood on the edge of a new frontier. The land was vast, untamed, and filled with promise, but also challenges that only the brave and resilient could face. It was during this time in the wild hills of Tennessee that a man was born whose name would become synonymous with courage, adventure, and the enduring spirit of the American wilderness. Davy Crockett, born in 1786, grew up in the rough and unforgiving landscape of the frontier. From a young age he learned to live by the land, hunting, trapping, and navigating the dense forest that surrounded him. His life, a blend of hardship, politics, and military service, would eventually propel him into the heart of some of the most defining moments in American history. This is the story of Davy Crockett, the frontiersman, the congressman, the folk hero, and the man whose life and legend continue to echo through the pages of American history. As we journey through his life from his childhood in the wilderness to his final stand at the Alamo, we will reflect on the values and ideals he embodied: honor, independence, and sacrifice. These qualities, now woven into the very fabric of American identity, make Crockett a figure who resonates even today. Please, take a moment to relax and settle into this quiet, reflective journey through history. As you listen, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing where you're watching from. Davy Crockett was born on August 17th, 1786, in a small log cabin near the banks of the Watauga River in what is now northeastern Tennessee. The son of John Crockett, a farmer and soldier, and Rebecca Hawkins, Davy was the fifth of 9 children. The Crockett family, like many pioneers, were part of the great migration of settlers moving westward in search of new opportunities. Yet they would encounter hardships that were inevitable for families living on the rugged frontier. The land they inhabited was a raw, untamed wilderness, far removed from the comforts and structures of civilization. At the time of Crockett's birth, Tennessee was still a part of North Carolina, and the region was largely unsettled by Europeans. The early years of his life were spent in a place where dangers lurked in the form of wild animals, extreme weather, and the ever-present threat of conflict with Native American tribes. Crockett's early childhood was marked by both hardship and opportunity. His family was not wealthy, and Davy's education was limited. He could neither read nor write at an early age, and his schooling was sporadic at best. Nevertheless, Crockett's father valued independence and self-sufficiency, qualities that would shape his son's character for the rest of his life. From an early age, Davy was introduced to the skills that would become his lifelong companions: hunting, fishing, and navigating the wilderness. These were the tools of survival in a world where food was scarce, and only the resourceful could thrive. In those early years, Crockett's family faced many struggles. The land they lived on was not kind to farmers, and the hardships of frontier life were evident in the daily toil required to scratch a living from the earth. The frontier was a place where a man's worth was often measured by his ability to provide for his family and defend what was his. For Davy, this meant long hours in the woods hunting game, a task he came to excel at as a boy. His remarkable skill with a rifle, often highlighted in stories of his youth, earned him a reputation among his neighbors as a young man of exceptional ability. His prowess in the wilderness would become one of the defining aspects of his life, and the stories of his exploits would grow into the larger-than-life legend he would eventually embody. Davy Crockett's formative years were also marked by the loss of his mother, Rebecca, when he was still quite young. She passed away when Davy was just a boy, leaving a deep void in his life. The death of his mother was a loss that Davy would later reflect upon in his speeches and writings, acknowledging the hardship it brought him. Her passing further solidified his need to mature quickly, shouldering responsibilities at an early age. At the age of 12, Davy's life took another turn. After the death of his mother and the increasing difficulty of frontier life, his father, who who had already endured multiple setbacks, made the difficult decision to send Davy away. The young Crockett was sent to live with a man named William B. Hayes, an acquaintance of his father's who took him in as a servant in exchange for food and shelter. This arrangement was not unusual in those days, and it was not uncommon for young men to work for others in order to gain some form of security. Crockett would later describe this time in his life with a sense of deep personal reflection, as he was separated from his family and placed under the care of another. Despite the hardships, Davy Crockett found his time in Hayes' household to be formative. He learned much about the value of hard work, perseverance, and the importance of standing up for oneself. The experiences in Hayes' home shaped his view of the world, particularly in terms of his belief in the value of independence and self-reliance. During his time in this household, Crockett encountered the early stirrings of his political ideals. His sense of fairness, as well as his growing understanding of the inequalities in life, began to take root. As he grew older, Crockett returned to his father's household, where he continued to grow in both stature and skill. He learned to harness the natural world in ways that many others could not, and his abilities in the woods were unmatched by most. He was known for his bravery and for his steadfast refusal to back down in the face of adversity. These qualities would define his life as he matured and went on to confront challenges much larger than the ones he faced in his youth. At the age of 18, Davy Crockett, now a young man, left home for good. Seeking to carve out his own path in life, he left behind the life of a servant and embarked on the path of a frontiersman. He travelled widely, experiencing the vastness of the frontier firsthand. This period of his life was defined by exploration, self-discovery, and the beginning of the legendary status Crockett would come to enjoy. He hunted in the woods, built cabins, and lived off the land, much as his father and his forefathers had done before him. Through these years, Crockett began to form the philosophies and ideals that would come to define him as a political figure and folk hero. The ideals of self-reliance, freedom, and the willingness to fight for one's beliefs were deeply ingrained in him from the beginning. His experience as a frontiersman provided the foundation for the stories of his exploits that would later shape his legendary status, both as a man of the wilderness and as a man of the people. The early years of Davy Crockett's life were not easy, but they were filled with formative experiences that would shape his destiny. His family struggles, time spent as a servant, and the hardships of frontier life all played a role in the development of his character. Crockett's ability to endure hardship, his deep sense of justice, and his remarkable skills as a hunter would become key elements of the mythic figure he would become. From these humble beginnings, Crockett would rise to become a symbol of the American frontier, a figure whose story would be told for generations to come. As Davy Crockett moved beyond his early years of hardship and frontier life, his intellectual formation began to take shape, albeit in an unconventional way. The rugged, isolated life on the frontier did not afford much in the way of formal education. The schools of the time were few and far between, and Crockett's early education was minimal. Like many young frontiersmen, his schooling was sporadic, marked more by the lessons learned from the land than from books or teachers. Nevertheless, Crockett's intellectual curiosity was evident even in his youth. Despite the limited access to formal education, he displayed an insatiable desire to learn. The wilderness, his constant companion, became his classroom. In his solitude, Crockett developed a keen understanding of nature, the workings of the land, and the principles of survival that were vital in the early days of American expansion. His education was not confined to traditional subjects such as mathematics or history. Rather, it was centered around the practical knowledge that would sustain him as a frontiersman. Crockett's family, though not wealthy, placed a high value on the education of their children. His father, John Crockett, who had himself experienced hardship and struggle, was a strong believer in the importance of self-reliance and resourcefulness. He believed that the frontier offered its own form of education, one that could teach lessons far more enduring than the ones found in books. Davy, in turn, absorbed these lessons, growing up with a deep respect for the values of independence, responsibility, and self-determination. It was during this time in the wilderness that Crockett began to read. While his formal schooling had been scant, he was not without access to books. As he moved into his teenage years, Crockett began to develop a passion for reading, albeit often alone and in the quiet moments after a day's work in the woods. He devoured any books he could find, particularly those that provided him with insights into the world outside the frontier. His reading began with practical manuals on hunting, trapping, and survival, but it soon expanded to works of history, politics, and literature. These books would shape the way he thought about the world, particularly about the role of the individual within it. One of the key intellectual influences on Crockett was the classical idea of republicanism, an ideology centered on civic virtue and the common good. The political writings of the time, including those of Thomas Paine and other early American thinkers, struck a deep chord with him. The ideals of the American Revolution, of a nation founded on liberty and justice for all, resonated strongly with Crockett's own sense of fairness and his belief in the rights of the common man. Although his education was informal and often self-taught, Crockett's intellectual formation was grounded in these principles, which would later guide his political career. It was this intellectual development that fueled Crockett's entry into the world of politics. Despite his lack of formal schooling, he developed a keen understanding of the issues that mattered to the people he represented. He saw firsthand the struggles of the common man in the wilderness, the need for fair laws, and the importance of self-government. These experiences, combined with his self-education, made him a natural candidate for public life. In the early years of his adulthood, Crockett's pursuit of knowledge was not confined to books. He also honed his public speaking skills, recognizing the importance of rhetoric in the world of politics. His reputation as a strong speaker and a man who could connect with the common people would serve him well when he later ran for office. Crockett's speeches, though often simple and straightforward, were rooted in the same values that he had internalized during his years on the frontier, values of honesty, fairness, and the protection of individual rights. Despite his lack of formal education, Crockett's intellectual journey was marked by a strong sense of curiosity and a drive for personal growth. He was not one to be satisfied with simple knowledge or experience. Instead, he sought to understand the broader world in which he lived. His intellectual formation was shaped not only by his self-study, but also by his experiences on the frontier and his growing awareness of the political currents sweeping across the nation. In many ways, Crockett's education was a reflection of the challenges and opportunities that defined his life. It was a mixture of formal and informal learning, shaped by necessity and circumstance. His education was not confined to the walls of a classroom or the pages of a textbook. Instead, it was woven into the fabric of his daily life on the frontier, and it was deeply connected to his sense of justice and fairness. As he moved into his political career, Crockett's education would play an essential role in shaping his decisions and actions. His intellectual foundation, built on the principles of individual rights and republicanism, would guide him as he navigated the complex political landscape of early 19th century America. Although he was often seen as a man of the frontier, his thoughts were deeply engaged with the broader issues of the nation, particularly the struggles of the common man and the role of government in protecting individual freedoms. Crockett's intellectual formation, while unconventional, was critical to his identity. It allowed him to understand the world beyond the frontier and gave him the tools to engage with it. His self-education was a testament to his resilience and determination, qualities that would become central to his legacy as both a frontiersman and a politician. By the time Crockett entered the political arena, He had already developed a unique blend of practical knowledge and intellectual curiosity that would set him apart from many of his contemporaries. His education, though informal, was grounded in the values of fairness, independence, and self-reliance, values that would guide him throughout his career and life. These values would later define his time in Congress and the stories of his public life, further cementing his legacy as a man of the people and a true frontier hero. As Davy Crockett matured into adulthood, his path veered toward public life, guided by the skills and values he had developed during his time on the frontier. Having already learned the importance of self-reliance, fairness, and independence, Crockett began to turn his attention toward a new challenge: public service. The skills he'd honed as a frontiersman, his ability to speak plainly and persuasively, his deep sense of justice, and his sharp instinct for navigating the complexities of life, would serve him well as he sought a role in his community and, eventually, in the broader political arena. Though Crockett's formal education was limited, he understood the importance of learning the law, especially as the frontier communities he lived in began to grow and establish systems of governance. In his early 20s, Crockett turned to legal studies, focusing on the principles that governed both property rights and the protection of individuals' freedoms. While he never formally became a trained lawyer in the traditional sense, his exposure to the law was significant enough for him to participate in legal matters and gain a solid understanding of its workings. He often took on roles related to land disputes and property ownership issues, areas that were crucial in a rapidly expanding frontier society. The frontier land was fertile for dispute, with boundaries often unclear and property ownership uncertain. As an active participant in his community, Crockett became involved in helping settle some of these conflicts. He applied a practical, common-sense approach to resolving disputes, and his understanding of the people and circumstances involved allowed him to make judgments that were seen as fair and just by those around him. At the same time, Crockett's reputation as a hunter and frontiersman continued to grow. His marksmanship was legendary, and he began to attract attention for his exploits in the wild. In the late 1820s, after years of building a name for himself on the frontier, Crockett's growing fame and leadership qualities led him to seek a different kind of challenge: public office. He decided to stand for election to the Tennessee state legislature in 1821, a decision that marked the beginning of his political career. His candidacy was a reflection of his belief in the power of the people and his growing sense of duty to represent those whose voices often went unheard. Crockett's platform was built on the principle that the government should serve the interests of the common man, particularly the settlers and frontiersmen who, in his view, were being overlooked by more established political figures. He ran not as an aristocrat or a man of wealth, but as a representative of the working people, those who, like himself, had come from humble beginnings and sought a better life through their own hard work and determination. Despite his relative inexperience in formal politics, Crockett was able to connect with voters by focusing on the issues that mattered most to them: the defense of individual liberties, the fair distribution of land, and the protection of their rights in the face of government overreach. He also took a strong stand against the political establishment, particularly those who were seen as part of the elite, who he believed had little understanding of the struggles of the common people. Though Crockett did not win his first bid for public office, he did not give up. His perseverance became one of his defining characteristics, and he continued to seek political opportunities, believing that his unique background and perspective would serve the people well. In 1825 he ran again, this time successfully securing a seat in the Tennessee state legislature. His victory marked the beginning of what would become a long and influential career in politics. In the legislature, Crockett quickly made a name for himself as a man who was not afraid to speak his mind. He became known for his outspokenness and his willingness to stand up for what he believed was right. even if it meant going against the majority or established interests. Crockett's early political career was marked by a series of bold moves, many of which would later define his legacy as a politician and a public figure. One of the defining issues that Crockett championed during his early career was the protection of the rights of settlers and frontiersmen. He saw firsthand how the government's policies often favoured the wealthy and powerful, leaving the people who worked the land to fend for themselves. As a result, he became an advocate for more equitable land policies, including the redistribution of land that had been unfairly taken from settlers. He also took a strong stance against what he saw as government corruption, denouncing policies that he believed disproportionately favoured special interests. Crockett's political career was also shaped by his opposition to the policies of Andrew Jackson, particularly Jackson's views on Native American removal. As a frontiersman who had lived alongside Native American tribes, Crockett had a nuanced understanding of the complexities surrounding this issue. While Jackson was determined to remove Native American tribes from their ancestral lands to make way for white settlers, Crockett argued that the government should respect the rights of these communities and treat them with fairness. This stance would later lead to a public rift between Crockett and Jackson, ultimately costing Crockett his seat in the US Congress, but it solidified his image as a principled man who was willing to stand alone in defense of his beliefs. His early career in the state legislature provided him with the experience and political connections he would need to later secure a position in the US House of Representatives. Crockett's time in state politics was formative, both in terms of his development as a politician and his increasing recognition as a man of the people. His commitment to his constituents, his advocacy for the rights of settlers, and his willingness to take on powerful interests made him a popular figure among ordinary Americans. By the time he entered the national stage, Crockett had already established himself as a man of action and conviction, a man who was dedicated to ensuring that the government remained responsive to the needs of the common citizen. His time in the Tennessee state legislature was just the beginning of a career that would take him to Washington, and ultimately to the battlefields of Texas, where his legacy would be forever sealed. As Davy Crockett's life began to shift from the wilderness to the world of politics, he found a steady source of support and strength in his personal life. In 1806, at the age of 20, he married a woman named Margaret Polly Elder, who hailed from a nearby family in Tennessee. The marriage, though rooted in a simple frontier love, would have a significant impact on Crockett's journey both as a man and a public figure. Polly's family was also connected to the growing Tennessee community, and her union with Crockett was a natural progression for two young people seeking stability and a future beyond the frontier hardships. Together they had 3 children, a son, John, and 2 daughters, one of whom died in infancy. Crockett's devotion to his family was apparent, though his political and military career would often pull him away from home for long stretches of time. While Davy continued to pursue his ambitions in public life, Polly remained at home, managing the family's affairs and overseeing their farm. In many ways, Crockett's marriage to Polly exemplified the resilience and adaptability required of frontier families. Like many couples of the time, they faced significant challenges, from financial uncertainty to the constant threat of external dangers. Despite these obstacles, Crockett found in Polly a grounding force, someone who shared his values and supported his rise from the hardships of the frontier to the challenges of public service. Polly was known to be practical, grounded, and strong-willed, qualities that would have been essential in the often unpredictable and demanding life they led. The couple's relationship, like many during this era, was tested by the harsh realities of the time. Crockett spent long periods away from his family, especially as he became more involved in politics and public service. His early years in the state legislature required him to travel frequently, leaving Polly to care for their home and children. Yet despite these separations, it is clear that Crockett was deeply devoted to Polly and his children, and he often expressed how much he missed them during his time away. In the early years of their marriage, the Crockett family lived in a modest cabin typical of the frontier lifestyle. Crockett's work as a frontiersman and landowner kept him occupied, but he was also beginning to establish himself as a leader in his local community. While Polly maintained their household, Davy sought opportunities to improve his standing in both his career and personal wealth. He gradually built a name for himself as a successful politician and soldier, which eventually afforded him greater comfort. Though the couple continued to face the ups and downs of frontier life, though Crockett's rise in the political world was in many ways a reflection of his personal ambitions, his family was never far from his thoughts. He often spoke about the importance of securing a better life for his children, and of ensuring that they should have opportunities he had not had as a young man. For Crockett, family life was a grounding influence, and he was keenly aware of the example he set for his children. His values, including self-reliance, courage, and fairness, were instilled in them from a young age. In addition to his devotion to Polly and their children, Crockett's marriage to her reflected his ability to balance his public persona with his private life. While Crockett was building a career in the political sphere, his personal life provided the foundation for his strength and resilience. He was not just a frontiersman or a politician, he was a father and a husband, roles that he cherished deeply. The connections he made with his family, particularly with Polly, were integral to his sense of purpose and commitment, both to his family and to the ideals he espoused as a public figure. However, as with many frontier marriages, Crockett's personal life would face challenges. In 1815, Polly passed away, leaving Davy to mourn the loss of his wife. Her death had a profound effect on him, and in the years that followed, Crockett would often reflect on his marriage to Polly as a source of great joy and deep loss. Her passing forced Crockett to confront his own mortality, and reminded him of the transience of life on the frontier, where death could come unexpectedly and without warning. It was during this period of mourning that Crockett's personal and political resolve became even more pronounced, as he threw himself into his work as a politician, continuing his fight for the common people. Despite this loss, Crockett remarried in 1818 to a woman named Elizabeth Patton, the daughter of a local merchant. Elizabeth, like Polly, was a strong and supportive partner, and together they had 3 more children. However, this marriage too would be marked by Crockett's long absences, as his career in politics and his service to the public would often take him far from home. Elizabeth, like Polly before her, had to manage the household and care for the children while Davy was away, leading a life of self-sufficiency and independence, much as her husband had done during his youth. Despite the challenges of his marriages, Crockett's family life provided him with both comfort and strength. His devotion to his children and his relationships with his wives shaped his understanding of the importance of home and family, values that he carried with him throughout his life. In many ways, Crockett's family life was a reflection of the frontier itself, rooted in hard work, resilience, and an enduring sense of duty. As Crockett's career in politics continued to unfold, his family remained a central part of his identity. The lessons he learned from his family and the sacrifices they made in support of his ambitions would become integral to his understanding of leadership and duty. Throughout his time in Congress and beyond, Crockett remained a family man at heart, deeply committed to ensuring that his children would have a better life than he had known on the frontier. Davy Crockett's family life, marked by love, loss, and perseverance, provided the emotional foundation for his later successes. It was in his personal relationships that he found the strength to continue fighting for what he believed in, both for his family and for the people he represented. By the early 1820s, Davy Crockett had become a man known not only for his remarkable skills as a frontiersman, but also for his growing involvement in the political life of his community. His early life had been defined by a fierce independence, a quality that would serve him well as he began to grapple with the larger political landscape of the United States. As the country emerged from the chaos of its revolutionary birth, it was entering a period of growing tension over issues that would define the nation's future, particularly regarding the role of government, the rights of the people, and the burgeoning frontier. Crockett's entry into the world of politics was not solely motivated by ambition, but by a profound sense of justice and fairness that had taken root in him during his years as a frontiersman. Throughout his life, he had witnessed the struggles of ordinary men and women, the settlers, farmers, and workers who had fought to carve out a living in the harsh American wilderness. It was these people who captured his imagination and earned his deep respect. Crockett viewed them as the backbone of the nation, and he firmly believed that their interests should be represented in the halls of government. The early 1820s were a period of significant political change in the United States. The country had survived the turbulence of the War of 1812, but political divisions were growing. Tensions over the role of the federal government, particularly regarding the powers of the executive branch, were becoming more pronounced. At the centre of this divide was Andrew Jackson, who represented a populist movement that sought to empower the common people, but also embraced a strong centralised executive. Crockett, however, found himself at odds with Jackson and his policies, while Jackson was gaining increasing power and popularity, particularly through his advocacy for the expansion of white settlement and his stance against Native American tribes. Crockett began to develop a sense of caution about Jackson's growing influence. Crockett's populism was rooted not in the strength of a single individual, but in the power of the people as a collective. He believed in a more restrained government, one that prioritized fairness, justice, and the rights of the common man. Crockett's opposition to Jackson became more pronounced as he entered the political fray. He ran for the Tennessee state legislature and won a seat in 1821, where he quickly gained a reputation for his willingness to stand up for what he believed was right. His political views were marked by a deep distrust of concentrated power, especially when it came to the government's treatment of Native Americans and its role in the affairs of settlers on the frontier. Crockett's own experiences on the frontier gave him a unique perspective on these issues, and he was quick to criticize policies that he believed disproportionately favored the wealthy and powerful. Crockett's opposition to Jackson reached its peak over the issue of Indian removal. Jackson's policy, known as the Indian Removal Act of 1830, called for the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands to territories west of the Mississippi River. For Jackson, this was a means of ensuring that land was available for white settlers to cultivate, and he framed it as a necessary step for the expansion of the United States. However, Crockett, like many others, had reservations about the moral implications of such a policy. Having lived alongside Native American tribes during his years on the frontier, he recognized the complexity of the situation and saw firsthand the impact of Jackson's policies on native communities. Crockett opposed the forced removal, arguing that the Native Americans had the right to their land and that the government should respect their sovereignty. This stance put him directly at odds with Jackson and many of his supporters. Crockett's growing disillusionment with Jackson's leadership led him to make a difficult decision. In 1830, after a particularly contentious debate over Indian removal, Crockett broke with Jackson and his political allies. Crockett had always been a man of principle, and when he felt that Jackson's policies betrayed the very ideals of fairness and justice that he had long championed, he could no longer support the president. In a dramatic moment, Crockett took the bold step of resigning from the U.S. House of Representatives, declaring that he could not, in good conscience, continue to serve under a president whose policies he could not support. Crockett's resignation marked a significant turning point in his political career, but it also underscored his unwavering commitment to his beliefs. He would not compromise on what he saw as a matter of principle, even if it meant losing his political position. His decision to stand up for what he believed was right, even at the cost of his own career, cemented his reputation as a man of integrity, one who was willing to challenge the status quo in order to defend the common man and the ideals of the American Revolution. In many ways, Crockett's opposition to Jackson and his decision to resign were emblematic of his broader approach to life. He was a man who believed in the power of the people, in the importance of individual rights, and in the fundamental fairness of the American system. He viewed government not as an instrument for consolidating power, but as a tool for protecting the rights and liberties of the people. This deep sense of justice and fairness, combined with his first-hand experiences on the frontier, made Crockett a unique figure in American politics. While many politicians of the time were content to align themselves with powerful figures like Jackson, Crockett was unafraid to stand alone in defense of his principles. His willingness to challenge the prevailing political establishment would have a lasting impact on his legacy, shaping the way future generations would view him not only as a frontiersman and a hero, but also as a politician who remained true to the ideals of the American Revolution. Crockett's sense of duty to the people would remain a driving force throughout his life. His commitment to the principles of fairness, justice, and the protection of individual rights would define his legacy, both as a politician and as a folk hero. In the years that followed, Crockett's name would become synonymous with the spirit of the frontier, courageous, independent, and unafraid to challenge the forces of power when they threatened the rights of the people. The year was 1776, and across the 13 American colonies, the winds of change were stirring. The discontent with British rule had reached a boiling point, and the question of independence was no longer a distant hope, but a necessity. The colonies had been growing increasingly resentful of the Crown's oppressive policies, and voices calling for independence were becoming louder and more frequent. It was against this backdrop that Davy Crockett, just a young man at the time, would soon be swept into the events that would shape the future of the nation. Though he was not yet a household name, Crockett's connection to the American Revolution was both indirect and yet deeply embedded in the era's spirit of defiance and self-determination. Crockett's formative years had been spent on the frontiers of Tennessee, far removed from the intellectual and political centers of the American colonies. However, like many young men of his time, he was keenly aware of the tensions that were growing between the colonies and Britain. Crockett, raised in a fiercely independent household, had learned from an early age the value of personal freedom and the right to self-determination. These were values that would later define his political beliefs and make him a champion of the common man. Though Crockett himself did not directly participate in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, his life was irrevocably shaped by the decisions made by the men who gathered in Philadelphia that fateful summer. The Declaration, crafted by Thomas Jefferson and adopted by the Continental Congress, would forever change the course of American history and the course of Crockett's life. For Crockett, the ideas espoused in the Declaration, particularly the belief in the inherent rights of individuals, would resonate deeply and influence his worldview throughout his career. The Declaration of Independence articulated a bold and revolutionary vision of a new nation, one in which the people had the right to determine their own destiny, free from the tyranny of a distant monarchy. It was a statement of ideals and principles that Crockett would later adopt as his own. Crockett's understanding of freedom, independence, and justice was shaped by these revolutionary ideas. His personal experiences, as a frontiersman and later as a politician, would serve to deepen his commitment to these ideals. Crockett's formative experiences in the wilderness had given him a profound understanding of the struggle for survival and self-sufficiency. On the frontier, individuals were forced to rely on themselves for survival, and this self-reliance was central to the American ideal of independence. Crockett, raised in this environment, would come to view government as a necessary evil, one that should serve the people and not the other way around. He would see the same struggle for freedom reflected in the debates surrounding the Revolutionary War, as the colonists fought to free themselves from what they viewed as British tyranny. In the years following the drafting of the Declaration, Crockett would take up the mantle of the Revolution's ideals in his own way, serving as a soldier during the War of 1812 and later as a politician. Though he did not play a direct role in the drafting of the Declaration, Crockett's life was a living testament to the principles espoused in it. His decision to oppose the policies of President Andrew Jackson, his commitment to defending the rights of settlers, and his unwavering belief in the rights of the common people all echoed the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration's emphasis on equality and the protection of individual rights would resonate strongly with Crockett, whose own life had been shaped by these very principles. As he sought to represent the people of Tennessee in the state legislature and later in Congress, Crockett would be guided by the belief that all men were created equal and deserved the opportunity to determine their own futures. As Crockett's political career progressed, he often invoked the language of liberty and independence, drawing on the ideas of the Revolution to frame his opposition to what he saw as the growing concentration of power in the federal government. For Crockett, the Declaration was not merely a historical document, but a call to action, a reminder of the rights and freedoms that were at the heart of the American experiment. Though Crockett's role in the American Revolution was that of a later generation patriot, he was part of a continuing legacy, one that extended back to the Founding Fathers and the ideals they enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. His life, both as a frontiersman and a politician, was a reflection of those ideals, as he fought for the rights of the common man and against the encroachment of governmental power. Crockett's unwavering belief in freedom and justice, tempered by his deep connection to the land and the people, made him a true heir to the revolutionary spirit that had birthed the United States. The Declaration of Independence and the revolution it sparked laid the foundation for the nation that Crockett would come to serve. The fight for liberty and self-determination, so central to the cause of American independence, would echo throughout Crockett's life, influencing his actions and decisions as he sought to defend the rights of the people and ensure that the principles of freedom and justice remained at the heart of American life. By the 1820s, Davy Crockett's name had become known across the young nation, and his influence was beginning to grow beyond the Tennessee frontier, as his reputation as a staunch advocate for the common man, a fierce protector of individual rights, and a political figure of principle spread. Crockett began to draw the attention of leaders both at home and abroad. His unyielding stand on political issues, especially his opposition to Andrew Jackson, had earned him both admiration and criticism, but it was clear that Crockett was a man whose political star was rising. Though Crockett was still very much a frontiersman at heart, the next chapter of his life would take him far from the familiar woods and rugged hills of Tennessee. The call to serve his country in a different capacity, in a diplomatic role, would mark a significant departure from his early life. In 1829 he was appointed as the United States Minister to France, a post that seemed an unlikely yet fitting one for a man whose reputation had been built on a unique combination of rugged individualism and political conviction. At the time, the position of Minister to France was one of great importance. France, though a former enemy during the American Revolution, was now a valued ally and a crucial player in the balance of European power. The diplomatic relations between the United States and France had settled into a tense but amicable state, and Crockett's appointment was seen as an opportunity to further solidify the bonds between the two nations. However, for Crockett, the move was one more step in his evolution from a backwoods politician to a figure of national and international significance. Crockett's time in France was a complex one. Arriving in Paris, he was welcomed as a representative of the United States, but it was clear that his rustic persona, shaped by the frontier and the rough simplicity of his upbringing, contrasted sharply with the sophisticated world of European diplomacy. Crockett's lack of formal education, compared to many of the diplomats he would encounter, was often pointed out, and some questioned whether he was truly equipped for such a prestigious role. Yet Crockett, ever the resolute figure, embraced the challenge with the same determination that had defined his earlier life. Despite the cultural and political differences between him and the European elite, Crockett's tenure in France was marked by several notable achievements. He quickly established himself as a man who could be counted on to represent American interests, especially in dealings related to trade and international relations. His straightforward manner and deep understanding of the principles of liberty and justice earned him respect from some corners of French society, while his opposition to certain policies of the US government kept him at odds with others. One of the key moments in Crockett's diplomatic career came when he took a strong stance against the policies of the United States regarding the treatment of Native American tribes. Crockett, who had witnessed firsthand the impact of the American government's treatment of indigenous peoples, felt that the French, with their own complex history of colonialism, might understand the gravity of the situation. He worked tirelessly to raise awareness of the injustices faced by the Native Americans, hoping that his advocacy would inspire international pressure on the US government to reconsider its stance. In addition to his political efforts, Crockett's time in France provided him with the opportunity to expand his intellectual horizons. Surrounded by European culture and history, Crockett began to deepen his understanding of the world beyond the American frontier. While he was never one to embrace the complexities of European politics wholeheartedly, he was intellectually curious, and his time in Paris allowed him to explore a different way of thinking and living. His interactions with European thinkers, artists, and intellectuals helped shape his understanding of government and the rights of individuals, and he began to see his role as a politician in a broader, more global context. However, despite his intellectual growth and political success, Crockett's tenure in France was not without challenges. The delicate nature of diplomatic work often clashed with his plain-spoken, no-nonsense approach. As a man who valued direct action over negotiation, and who preferred to speak from the heart rather than engaging in the diplomatic niceties of European courts, Crockett often found himself at odds with the more seasoned diplomats around him. His rough manners, combined with his strong opinions, sometimes made him an outsider in the refined circles of European diplomacy. Crockett's time in France also highlighted his deep sense of duty to his home country. Even as he adapted to the demands of foreign service, he remained a staunch defender of American interests, particularly in trade and foreign policy. His role as minister to France was a reminder that despite his frontier origins, Crockett had become a figure of national importance, and his actions abroad were indicative of the growing influence of the United States on the world stage. After several years of service, Crockett returned to the United States in the early 1830s, his diplomatic mission complete. Though his time in France had been brief and filled with challenges, it had been a period of growth for Crockett, a time when he expanded his vision of what it meant to serve his country. He had learned that diplomacy was not just about representing the nation's interests abroad, but also about understanding the larger global forces that shaped the American experience. Crockett's diplomatic service was a chapter of his life that, while often overlooked, added to the rich tapestry of his legacy as a man who was not only a frontiersman, but also a politician with a vision for the future of his country. In the years that followed, Crockett would return to the political stage in America, where his reputation as a staunch defender of liberty and individual rights would continue to guide his actions. But his time in France and the experiences he gained there would shape his approach to governance and diplomacy, making him not just a man of the frontier, but a man of the world. Theodore Roosevelt's political career had already been marked by dramatic twists and turns, but it was in the election of 1904 that he truly cemented his place in American history. After the assassination of President William McKinley in 1901, Roosevelt had ascended to the presidency at the age of 42, making him the youngest person to ever hold the office. His rise to power had been swift, but his time in the White House would be anything but ordinary. By the time 1904 rolled around, Roosevelt had already become a central figure in American politics. His progressive reforms, bold leadership, and unapologetic embrace of imperialism had won him the admiration of many, but also created enemies among the political elite. His presidency was a departure from the cautious, conservative politics that had preceded him. Roosevelt believed in action, swift, decisive action, and he made no effort to hide his ambitions for both the country and his place in the world. The 1904 election would prove to be one of Roosevelt's defining moments. Though his ascension to the presidency was the result of McKinley's untimely death, Roosevelt's efforts to win the presidency on his own terms were nothing short of remarkable. He was keenly aware that the public's perception of him would play a pivotal role in his ability to maintain his political agenda, and so he embarked on a vigorous campaign to secure his re-election. The Republican Party, which had been deeply divided during the early years of Roosevelt's presidency, had come to recognize his popularity and power. Roosevelt was seen as a champion of the common man, advocating for progressive reforms that aimed to break up monopolies, regulate corporations, and improve labor conditions. He had made his mark as a trustbuster, taking on the powerful corporations that had long dominated the country's economy. His push for consumer protection laws and his stance on conservation resonated with many Americans who were tired of the influence of big business on government. However, not everyone in the Republican Party was thrilled with Roosevelt's approach. The more conservative wing of the party, led by figures such as Senator Mark Hanna and other business elites, viewed Roosevelt's aggressive reform policies with suspicion. They feared that his progressive agenda would alienate the business community and disrupt the status quo. Despite these internal divisions, Roosevelt managed to secure the Republican nomination for a second term in 1904, largely due to his widespread popularity and the support of ordinary Americans. In the general election, Roosevelt faced the Democratic candidate Alton B. Parker, a judge from New York. While Parker was respected as a jurist, he lacked the dynamic personality and energy that Roosevelt brought to the campaign trail. Roosevelt, on the other hand, had a natural charisma and a powerful message that resonated with the American public. He ran on a platform of continued progressive reforms, promising to tackle corruption, regulate business, and protect the environment. Roosevelt was known for his energetic and direct speaking style, and his speeches were filled with references to his belief in the power of government to make a positive impact on society. Roosevelt's campaign was marked by his willingness to challenge the political establishment. He made no effort to hide his disdain for the entrenched interests that had dominated American politics for years. He was committed to breaking up the monopolies that had a stranglehold on the economy, and he used his platform to rally support for antitrust laws and other progressive measures. His bold stance on issues such as labor rights, conservation, and corporate regulation endeared him to a growing coalition of reform-minded voters. The election was a landslide. Roosevelt won a decisive victory, securing 56% of the popular vote and an overwhelming majority in the Electoral College. His triumph in 1904 solidified his status as one of the most powerful and influential figures in American politics. Roosevelt's second term would prove to be just as dynamic as his first, as he continued to push for reforms that would reshape the nation. In his second term, Roosevelt's focus turned to furthering the progressive agenda he had started in his first term. He pushed for a more aggressive foreign policy, particularly in Latin America and the Pacific. He famously said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," and his foreign policy was characterized by the use of American military power to assert U.S. interests abroad. Roosevelt's support for the construction of the Panama Canal and his intervention in Latin American affairs were key aspects of his foreign policy during his second term. At home, Roosevelt continued his fight against corporate monopolies, passing additional legislation to regulate business practices and protect workers. He was deeply committed to conservation and worked to expand the national park system, ensuring that America's natural beauty would be preserved for future generations. His reforms were not without controversy, but they solidified his legacy as a president who was unafraid to take on the powerful interest that had long dominated American life. Roosevelt's second term was marked by a growing sense of optimism and energy. He believed that the country was at a crossroads and that it was the government's responsibility to ensure that progress was made in the service of the people. He saw his re-election in 1904 as a mandate to continue his work, and he was determined to leave a lasting mark on the nation. Despite his success, Roosevelt faced mounting pressure as the end of his second term approached. The 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which would later be passed in 1951 to limit presidents to 2 terms, had not yet been enacted, and Roosevelt was eligible for a 3rd term. However, he chose not to seek re-election in 1908, believing that it was important to adhere to the tradition of a 2-term presidency. Roosevelt's decision to step down was a moment of introspection, as he recognized that his time in office had come to an end and that it was time for new leadership to emerge. One of the most significant achievements of Theodore Roosevelt's presidency was the construction of the Panama Canal, a monumental project that forever changed the geography of the Americas and solidified Roosevelt's reputation as a bold and decisive leader. The canal would provide a direct link between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, dramatically shortening the travel time for ships and facilitating global trade. Roosevelt's role in the canal's construction is remembered as a testament to his vision, determination, and willingness to navigate the complexities of international diplomacy. The idea of building a canal through Central America had been discussed for centuries, but it was Roosevelt who turned it into a reality. The need for a canal was clear. American trade interests, as well as military strategy, would benefit enormously from such a link. The ability to quickly move naval vessels and merchant ships between the 2 oceans would bolster America's global presence and enhance its economic power. Roosevelt, ever the forward-thinking statesman, recognized the canal's importance and made its construction a key priority of his foreign policy. The original plan for the canal was devised by the French engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps, who had successfully overseen the construction of the Suez Canal in Egypt. However, the French effort to build a canal through Panama had faltered due to technical difficulties, disease, and financial mismanagement. By the time Roosevelt took office, the French had abandoned the project, leaving the canal's future uncertain. Roosevelt, however, was undeterred. He saw the failure of the French venture not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as an opportunity for the United States to step in and complete the canal. In 1903, Roosevelt began negotiations with Colombia, which then controlled Panama, in hopes of securing the rights to build the canal. The Colombian government, however, was unwilling to agree to the terms that Roosevelt proposed, leading to a diplomatic deadlock. Rather than accepting failure, Roosevelt chose to take decisive action. In a move that would forever change the region, he supported a rebellion in Panama where separatist sentiments had been brewing for years. On November 3, 1903, Panama declared its independence from Colombia, and within hours the United States recognized the new nation. Roosevelt's support for the Panamanian Revolution was controversial, and critics in both the US and abroad accused him of imperialism and interfering in the affairs of a sovereign country. Yet Roosevelt saw the rebellion as a necessary step in securing America's interests and fulfilling a vision that would benefit both the United States and Panama in the long run. Once Panama was established as an independent nation, Roosevelt moved quickly to negotiate the Haibunau-Varilla Treaty, which granted the US control over the land necessary to build the canal. In exchange, the United States promised to pay Panama $10 million up front, along with annual payments. The treaty was signed in November 1903, and construction of the canal began shortly thereafter. Roosevelt's role in facilitating the canal's construction was a decisive moment in his presidency. He had not only achieved a key foreign policy objective, but had also asserted America's dominance in the Western Hemisphere. The canal's construction was a monumental engineering challenge, involving the excavation of millions of cubic yards of earth, the construction of locks, and the management of a workforce that faced dangerous conditions. The project was complicated by the region's tropical climate, which harbored deadly diseases such as malaria and yellow fever. Roosevelt's commitment to the canal project was unwavering, and he sent a team of doctors and engineers to address the issue of disease, with Dr. William Gorgas leading the effort to control the spread of mosquitoes, which were responsible for transmitting the diseases. Their work led to the eventual eradication of yellow fever and malaria in the canal zone, marking a major achievement in public health. The construction of the Panama Canal was not without its difficulties. The project was plagued by technical problems, labor disputes, and logistical challenges, but Roosevelt remained focused on the end goal. He personally visited the canal zone in 1906, becoming the first sitting president to travel outside the continental United States. His visit to Panama was a symbolic gesture, signaling his personal commitment to the canal's success and reinforcing his belief in the importance of American influence in the region. By the time the canal was completed in 1914, it had become one of the greatest engineering feats in history. The canal shortened the journey between the east and west coasts of the United States by thousands of miles, making trade more efficient and strengthening America's economic power. It also cemented Roosevelt's legacy as a leader who was not afraid to take bold actions to secure America's place on the world stage. The completion of the Panama Canal also had far-reaching geopolitical implications. It enhanced America's ability to project military and economic power across both oceans, making the US a more formidable force in global affairs. Roosevelt's vision of a powerful and influential America was realized through the canal, which became a symbol of American engineering prowess and national strength. The canal's construction also had a lasting impact on US-Latin American relations. Roosevelt's support for Panama's independence and his role in securing the canal raised tensions with some Latin American countries, who viewed his actions as an example of American imperialism. Despite this, Roosevelt believed that the canal was vital to the future of the Americas and that it would ultimately benefit the region as a whole by promoting trade and fostering closer ties between the United States and Latin America. As Roosevelt left office in 1909, the Panama Canal stood as one of his greatest accomplishments, a testament to his ambition, his belief in American exceptionalism, and his willingness to take bold action to shape the nation's destiny. Though the canal would continue to be a source of controversy in the years to come, its impact on the United States and the world could not be denied. After the successful completion of the Panama Canal, Theodore Roosevelt's administration continued to be defined by bold, transformative actions that would forever alter America's role on the world stage. His progressive domestic policies, and particularly his foreign policy, stood as key elements of his legacy. Roosevelt firmly believed that the United States should assert itself as a global power, acting as both a protector of democracy and a force for economic and political stability. One of the most significant foreign policy achievements of his presidency was his approach to Latin America, which he viewed as a critical sphere of influence. Roosevelt's vision of U.S. intervention in the Western Hemisphere was encapsulated in what became known as the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, established in 1823 by President James Monroe, warned European nations against interfering in the affairs of the Americas, asserting that any such intervention would be seen as an act of aggression. However, Roosevelt believed that it was not enough simply to warn other nations against meddling in the hemisphere. He took the doctrine a step further, asserting that the United States had the right to intervene in Latin American countries in order to maintain stability and protect American interests. The Roosevelt corollary was largely shaped by Roosevelt's conviction that a nation's power was tied to its ability to influence the world around it. Roosevelt argued that the US had a duty to ensure that Latin American countries maintained order and paid their debts, which could otherwise lead to European intervention. He famously declared, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," meaning that the United States should rely on diplomatic means, backed by military power, to protect its interest in the region. Roosevelt's willingness to intervene in Latin America was soon put to the test in the Dominican Republic. In 1904, the Dominican Republic was struggling with a massive national debt and unable to meet its financial obligations. Roosevelt feared that European powers might take advantage of the situation, using it as a pretext to intervene and assert control over the Caribbean. To prevent this, Roosevelt brokered an agreement that placed the Dominican Republic's finances under US control, with American officials overseeing the collection of customs duties. This was a significant step in Roosevelt's broader vision of creating a more stable, US-aligned Latin America. This approach was not without its critics, as many saw Roosevelt's actions as imperialistic, a violation of the sovereignty of Latin American nations. But Roosevelt justified his interventions by emphasizing the need for order and stability in a region that was vital to American security and economic interests. His actions reflected his belief in the supremacy of American ideals and his commitment to securing the nation's future by asserting its influence across the Western Hemisphere. The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine also had long-lasting consequences for US-Latin American relations. In the short term, Roosevelt's interventions allowed the United States to strengthen its position as the dominant power in the Western Hemisphere, but it also sowed resentment among some Latin American countries who felt that their independence was being undermined by American actions. Roosevelt's foreign policy in Latin America would remain a source of tension throughout his presidency and beyond, as other US leaders sought to balance interventionism with diplomacy in the region. Despite the controversies surrounding his policies in Latin America, Roosevelt's foreign policy successes were not limited to the Western Hemisphere. His approach to world affairs was defined by his belief that the United States had a responsibility to take an active role in shaping global events. His handling of the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 to 1905 stands as one of his most celebrated achievements on the world stage. Roosevelt's mediation of peace talks between Russia and Japan, which had been engaged in a brutal conflict over territory in East Asia, earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906, making him the first American president to win the prestigious award. Roosevelt's diplomatic efforts to bring an end to the Russo-Japanese War were grounded in his belief that peace could only be achieved through strength and resolve. Roosevelt was not an advocate for isolationism. Instead, he saw the United States as a country that could shape global events and protect its interests through the exercise of power and diplomacy. His success in brokering the peace treaty between Russia and Japan demonstrated his ability to navigate complex international negotiations and further solidified his status as a world leader. In addition to his efforts in Latin America and Asia, Roosevelt's administration was also marked by a growing focus on environmental conservation. As president, Roosevelt expanded the national park system, creating several new parks, monuments, and wildlife refuges. His passion for conservation had been a lifelong commitment, and during his presidency, he took significant steps to preserve America's natural resources for future generations. Roosevelt's conservation policies became an integral part of his broader progressive agenda, which aimed to balance economic growth with environmental stewardship. Through his leadership, Roosevelt sought to ensure that the nation's economic prosperity would not come at the expense of its natural beauty and resources. He worked to establish the National Forest Service and signed into law the Antiquities Act, which gave the president the authority to create national monuments. Roosevelt's efforts to preserve the nation's landscapes and wildlife left a lasting legacy that continues to influence conservation efforts to this day. Roosevelt's presidency, particularly in terms of foreign policy and conservation, was a period of unprecedented action and reform. He viewed the United States as a nation destined to play a leading role in the world, and he took decisive steps to ensure that the country's power and influence were felt across the globe. At the same time, he sought to balance this assertiveness with a sense of responsibility, particularly when it came to protecting the environment and ensuring the country's economic future. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency is often remembered for his progressive reforms, which sought to address the inequities and abuses that had come with industrialization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the most defining features of Roosevelt's time in office was his aggressive stance on corporate regulation and his willingness to challenge the powerful monopolies that dominated American business. His efforts to break up large trusts and rein in corporate power earned him the nickname Trust Buster and marked a significant chapter in the development of American economic policy. Roosevelt's concern about the growing power of corporations was rooted in his belief that no individual or entity should be allowed to wield excessive control over the economy at the expense of the public good. As he saw it, the rise of monopolies and trusts threatened to undermine competition, exploit workers, and harm consumers. His administration took steps to regulate large corporations and ensure that businesses operated fairly, with a focus on protecting the interests of ordinary Americans. The first major trust that Roosevelt targeted was the Northern Securities Company, a railroad conglomerate formed by the financial magnates J.P. Morgan, James J. Hill, and E. H. Harriman. This company controlled nearly every railroad in the western United States, and was seen as a powerful monopoly that stifled competition. Roosevelt, recognizing the threat this posed to both consumers and other businesses, decided to take legal action against the company. In 1902, the administration filed a lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act, which prohibited anti-competitive practices and monopolistic behavior. The case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of the government, ordering the dissolution of the Northern Securities Company. This victory was a significant moment in Roosevelt's presidency, as it signaled that the government could in fact challenge powerful corporations in court and win. The Northern Securities case set a precedent for future antitrust cases and marked the beginning of Roosevelt's aggressive approach to regulating corporate monopolies. Roosevelt's actions were not just limited to railroads. Over the course of his presidency, he pursued legal action against a wide range of monopolies in industries such as oil, tobacco, and meat packing. The Standard Oil Company, led by John D. Rockefeller, was another major target. In 1906, Roosevelt's administration filed a lawsuit against Standard Oil, accusing the company of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act by using unfair practices to eliminate competition. The case was eventually taken up by the Supreme Court, which ruled in 1911 that Standard Oil must be broken up into smaller companies. This was another victory for Roosevelt's antitrust efforts and demonstrated his commitment to promoting competition and curbing corporate excesses. Roosevelt's approach to trust-busting was not aimed at dismantling all large corporations, but rather at ensuring that they operated in a way that was fair and beneficial to society. He believed in regulating big business rather than completely eliminating it. He referred to his policy as the Square Deal, which was based on the idea that all Americans, regardless of their social or economic status, should have a fair opportunity to succeed. Roosevelt's trust-busting efforts were part of his broader goal of creating a more equitable society, one where large corporations would not be allowed to exploit workers or consumers for their own profit. In addition to his legal battles against monopolies, Roosevelt also sought to create new regulatory frameworks that would give the government greater oversight of business practices. The establishment of the Bureau of Corporations in 1903 was one such effort. The Bureau was tasked with investigating the practices of large corporations and ensuring that they complied with antitrust laws. Roosevelt's administration also enacted the Hepburn Act of 1906, which gave the Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, the authority to regulate railroad rates, a move aimed at curbing the power of the railroad monopolies. Roosevelt's corporate reforms were not without controversy. Many business leaders and conservatives viewed his actions as an overreach of government power, and some accused him of using the government to target and punish successful entrepreneurs. However, Roosevelt firmly believed that the government had a responsibility to intervene when businesses became too powerful and when their actions harmed the public. He saw trust-busting as a necessary step in maintaining a fair and competitive economy, one where no single entity could control entire industries and dictate the terms of trade. Roosevelt's stance on corporate reform also extended to labor relations. He believed that workers had the right to fair wages, safe working conditions, and the ability to organize. Roosevelt took a progressive approach to labor issues, supporting workers' rights while also recognizing the importance of maintaining industrial efficiency. His administration was the first to take serious steps toward addressing the concerns of labor unions and workers, including supporting arbitration in disputes between workers and employers. Roosevelt's handling of the 1902 coal strike in Pennsylvania, where he intervened to mediate a settlement between miners and mine owners, was a key example of his commitment to balancing the interests of both workers and business owners. By the time Roosevelt left office in 1909, his administration had achieved significant progress in regulating corporate power and improving labor conditions. The groundwork he laid for future antitrust efforts, as well as his emphasis on fairness and competition, would continue to shape American economic policy for decades to come. Roosevelt's legacy as a trust-buster remains one of the defining features of his presidency, and his efforts to regulate big business and protect the public continue to be remembered as an important chapter in the history of American reform. Theodore Roosevelt's passion for the natural world was one of the defining aspects of his character. His childhood love of nature, combined with his intellectual curiosity and adventurous spirit, led him to become one of the most important conservationists in American history. As president, Roosevelt took bold steps to protect the nation's natural landscapes, and his efforts laid the foundation for the modern conservation movement in the United States. Roosevelt believed that the nation's natural resources were a national treasure that should be protected for future generations. He understood that industrialization and rapid economic growth posed a threat to the environment, and he was determined to safeguard the country's wilderness from exploitation. His conservation efforts were not just about preserving land for its beauty or scientific value. They were about securing the long-term health and prosperity of the nation. One of Roosevelt's first acts as president was to create the United States Forest Service, USFS, in 1905. Under the leadership of Gifford Pinchot, the USFS was tasked with managing and preserving public lands. Roosevelt's vision for the Forest Service was to balance conservation with responsible use. He believed that the country's forests, while valuable for their timber and resources, should be managed in a sustainable way that would allow future generations to benefit from them. By establishing the Forest Service, Roosevelt ensured that America's national forests would be protected from overexploitation and preserved for the public good. Roosevelt's commitment to conservation went far beyond the creation of the Forest Service. Throughout his presidency, he worked to establish national parks, monuments, and wildlife refuges across the country. He used the Antiquities Act of 1906, a piece of legislation passed by Congress, to protect public lands and preserve significant sites. The Antiquities Act allowed the president to designate national monuments, and Roosevelt took full advantage of this power, creating 18 national monuments during his time in office. These included iconic sites such as the Grand Canyon, which Roosevelt set aside in 1908, recognizing the canyon's natural beauty and historical significance. Roosevelt's efforts to protect America's wilderness were also aimed at preserving the habitats of endangered species. He worked to create wildlife refuges where animals could live in peace and where their populations could recover. Roosevelt saw the preservation of wildlife as an essential part of his conservation agenda, and he believed that the government had a responsibility to protect both the land and the creatures that inhabited it. Under his leadership, the U.S. government set aside over 230 million acres of land for conservation, including national forests, parks, and wildlife refuges. One of Roosevelt's most significant accomplishments in the realm of conservation was the establishment of the National Park Service, NPS, in 1916, shortly after he left office. Although Roosevelt himself did not live to see the establishment of the NPS, his conservation policies and vision for public lands laid the groundwork for its creation. The National Park Service was designed to oversee the management and protection of the country's national parks, ensuring that these lands would be preserved for public enjoyment and scientific study. Roosevelt's efforts to protect America's natural heritage were instrumental in shaping the NPS and solidifying the importance of national parks as part of the American landscape. Roosevelt's passion for conservation was deeply personal. He often took time away from his busy political schedule to explore the wilderness, and he believed that spending time in nature was essential for personal growth and well-being. His expeditions into the American West and his time spent in the Badlands helped him to develop a lifelong connection to the land and a deep appreciation for its beauty. Roosevelt once remarked, "In nature we are reminded of the tremendous forces at work in the world, forces that transcend human understanding." His love for nature and his belief in the importance of conservation were not only political, but deeply philosophical, rooted in his personal experiences and values. Roosevelt's conservation efforts were not without their critics. Some business interests and landowners saw his policies as an infringement on their rights and an obstacle to economic development. They argued that Roosevelt's commitment to preserving public lands would hinder progress and the growth of industries such as mining, logging, and agriculture. However, Roosevelt remained steadfast in his belief that the preservation of natural resources was essential to the long-term health of the nation. He often clashed with those who sought to exploit the land for short-term gain, arguing that the environment was too valuable to be sacrificed for profit. Despite the opposition, Roosevelt's legacy as a conservationist remains one of his most enduring achievements. His efforts to preserve America's natural landscape set the stage for future generations to appreciate and protect the country's wilderness. Roosevelt's vision of conservation as a national priority became a guiding principle for future presidents and policymakers, and his influence can still be seen in the ongoing work of the National Park Service and other conservation organizations. Through his efforts, Roosevelt helped to foster a national awareness of the importance of environmental stewardship. He recognized that protecting the land was not just about preserving beauty. It was about ensuring the health of the country's natural resources and securing a sustainable future for all Americans. His conservation policies transformed the way the United States viewed its public lands, and his legacy continues to inspire those who seek to protect the environment today. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, marked by bold action and reform, came to an end in 1909, when he chose not to seek re-election for a third term. Having served nearly 2 full terms as president, Roosevelt had transformed the United States into a more progressive, powerful, and globally engaged nation. However, as he left the White House, Roosevelt faced both personal and political challenges that would shape his final years. After stepping down, Roosevelt retreated from public life for a brief period. He sought a respite from the demands of the presidency by embarking on an extended safari in Africa, a journey that would take him to the heart of the continent, The trip was not only an adventure but also an opportunity for Roosevelt to recover from the intense pressure he had experienced in office. He spent nearly a year in Africa, where he hunted big game, collected specimens for the Smithsonian Institution, and marveled at the natural beauty of the continent. Though his time in Africa allowed him a much-needed escape, Roosevelt's restless nature ensured that he would not remain out of the public eye for long. In 1910, just a year after leaving the White House, Roosevelt returned to the United States. He was greeted with enthusiasm by the public, and his sense of adventure and vigor was as strong as ever. However, his return to politics was not without complications. Roosevelt was deeply disappointed by the policies of his successor, William Howard Taft, whom he'd once supported and helped to elect. Roosevelt had expected Taft to continue his progressive agenda, but he found that Taft had instead moved the Republican Party in a more conservative direction. This ideological rift led Roosevelt to criticize Taft's administration and to consider challenging him for the presidency in the 1912 election. In 1912, Roosevelt launched a dramatic campaign for the Republican nomination. He argued that Taft had abandoned the progressive policies that had defined Roosevelt's presidency, and that the Republican Party needed a strong leader who would continue to fight for reform. When Taft secured the nomination, Roosevelt broke with the Republican Party and formed his own political organization, the Progressive Party, which became known as the Bull Moose Party. His campaign was energized by his message of political and economic reform, but his challenge to the sitting president divided the Republican Party and ultimately led to the election of the Democratic candidate Woodrow Wilson. Although Roosevelt did not win the 1912 election, his campaign reshaped the political landscape of the time. His Progressive Party platform called for a wide range of reforms, including women's suffrage, direct election of senators, child labor laws, and environmental protection. While Roosevelt's bid for a third term ended in defeat, his influence on the political discourse of the time was undeniable. His ideas would continue to resonate in the years that followed, particularly with the rise of the New Deal under Franklin D. Roosevelt, his distant cousin. In the years following his defeat in 1912, Roosevelt largely withdrew from active politics, but remained a prominent public figure. He continued to speak out on issues such as international diplomacy, military preparedness, and the importance of progressive reforms. His influence, though no longer exercised through elected office, continued to be felt across the country. Roosevelt's political legacy would endure not just through his policies, but through the larger cultural and ideological shift he helped to create. Roosevelt's health, which had always been fragile in his youth, began to decline as he entered his 50s and 60s. Despite his vigorous lifestyle, the toll of his many years of public service, and his intense drive to lead began to take its toll on his body. In January 1919, Roosevelt suffered a series of health setbacks, culminating in his death on January 6, 1919, at the age of 60. His passing marked the end of an era, but his impact on the nation and the world was far from over. In the years following Roosevelt's death, his legacy as a progressive reformer, a fearless leader, and a champion of conservation continued to grow. His efforts to regulate big business, protect natural resources, and expand American influence on the world stage laid the foundation for much of the 20th century's political and environmental policy. Roosevelt's commitment to action, his belief in the importance of physical vigor, and his idealism about America's role in the world shaped the nation's identity in profound ways. Roosevelt's place in American history is secure not only because of his accomplishments, but also because of his enduring influence on the American psyche. He remains an icon of strength, energy, and vision, a man who refused to be constrained by the limits of his time and who sought to reshape the nation according to his progressive ideals. His life continues to inspire those who believe in the power of government to effect positive change and in the ability of individuals to make a difference in the world. Roosevelt's final years were marked by his continued passion for life and public service. Even in the face of declining health, he remained committed to his principles and his vision for the future. His legacy, shaped by his vision of a stronger, more progressive America, continues to guide the country today. Roosevelt was not just a president. He was a symbol of what it means to lead with courage, conviction, and an unwavering sense of purpose. Theodore Roosevelt's legacy is vast and multifaceted, encompassing his transformative leadership as president, his visionary reforms, and his enduring influence on American society and the world. Roosevelt was not merely a politician. He was a larger-than-life figure whose ideas and actions reshaped the United States in profound ways. His presidency marked a turning point in the nation's history, and his impact continues to resonate in the political, environmental, and cultural spheres. Roosevelt's most immediate legacy lies in the progressive reforms he championed during his time in office. He believed in the power of government to regulate industry, protect workers, and ensure fairness in the marketplace. His commitment to breaking up monopolies and trusts known as trust-busting set the stage for a new era of government oversight and corporate regulation. The Sherman Antitrust Act, strengthened by Roosevelt's administration, became a powerful tool for the government to dismantle monopolistic companies, promoting competition and protecting consumers. In addition to his efforts to regulate big business, Roosevelt's domestic policy agenda focused on improving labor conditions, expanding civil rights, and promoting social welfare. He was one of the first presidents to advocate for the rights of workers, including supporting labor strikes and pushing for laws to improve working conditions. His administration's actions laid the groundwork for the labor movement of the 20th century, helping to secure better wages, shorter working hours, and safer working environments for millions of Americans. Roosevelt's environmental legacy is perhaps the most enduring aspect of his presidency. His belief in the importance of preserving the nation's natural resources for future generations led to the establishment of national parks, forests, and wildlife refuges. His commitment to conservation is evident in the creation of the U.S. Forest Service and the designation of more than 230 million acres of land for protection. Roosevelt's efforts to protect America's wilderness helped to lay the foundation for the modern environmental movement and solidified his place as one of the country's most important conservationists. Roosevelt's vision of conservation was not limited to protecting scenic landscapes. It was about managing resources in a way that benefited both the environment and the economy. He understood that natural resources such as timber, water, and minerals were vital to the nation's growth, but he also recognized the importance of preserving them for future generations. His creation of the National Park Service, though not fully realized during his presidency, was one of his greatest achievements and continues to safeguard America's natural heritage. On the world stage, Roosevelt's legacy is marked by his role in establishing the United States as a global power. His foreign policy, driven by his belief in American exceptionalism and his motto of "speak softly and carry a big stick," was characterized by active intervention and diplomacy. Roosevelt's involvement in the Spanish-American War, the construction of the Panama Canal, and his efforts to mediate the Russo-Japanese War cemented the United States' position as a dominant force in international affairs. Roosevelt's foreign policy set the stage for future American leadership on the world stage, and his approach to diplomacy influenced U.S. actions for decades to come. Roosevelt's diplomacy in the Western Hemisphere, particularly the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, was aimed at ensuring that the U.S. would have a dominant role in Latin America. By asserting the right to intervene in the affairs of its neighbors, Roosevelt sought to prevent European powers from gaining influence in the region. This interventionist policy, though controversial, helped secure U.S. interests in Latin America and shaped the course of American foreign policy for much of the 20th century. Domestically, Roosevelt's leadership left an indelible mark on American politics. He became the face of the progressive movement, a voice for the common people and a force for social change. His insistence on action and his willingness to challenge the political establishment set him apart from other leaders of his time. Roosevelt's presidency marked the end of an era of laissez-faire politics and the beginning of a new era of government intervention in the economy and society. His reforms, though often controversial, addressed the pressing issues of his time and laid the foundation for future social, political, and economic changes. Roosevelt's impact extended beyond his presidency. His ideas on leadership, strength, and service influenced future generations of Americans, from political figures to ordinary citizens. His focus on physical fitness, personal responsibility, and the idea of the strenuous life continues to inspire people today. Roosevelt's example of public service and commitment to the greater good remains a powerful model for those who seek to make a positive difference in the world. In the years following his death, Roosevelt's legacy continued to grow. His contributions to American society, politics, and the environment were recognized by future generations, and his name became synonymous with courage, action, and progress. His life and presidency were a testament to his belief in the power of government to effect positive change, and his example inspired countless leaders and activists who sought to continue his work. Roosevelt's life was a story of transformation, not only of himself but of the nation he helped to shape. He was a man who faced adversity and overcame it through sheer will and determination. His leadership was marked by a relentless drive to improve the nation and the world, and his legacy endures today in the institutions, policies, and ideals he championed. Though he is no longer with us, Theodore Roosevelt's influence remains a central part of America's history. His vision for a stronger, more just, and more powerful nation continues to inspire those who follow in his footsteps, and his legacy remains a testament to the power of leadership and the pursuit of progress. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency was deeply entwined with the progressive movement, a political and social movement that sought to address the challenges of industrialization, urbanization, and political corruption. Roosevelt was one of the most prominent figures of this movement, using his power and influence to promote reforms that would benefit the average American and curb the excesses of the wealthy and powerful. His approach to progressivism was practical, focused on achieving concrete results that would improve the lives of ordinary citizens. At the heart of Roosevelt's progressive agenda was the belief that government could and should play an active role in improving society. He rejected the laissez-faire approach that had dominated American politics in the 19th century, arguing instead that the government had a responsibility to intervene when necessary to protect public welfare and ensure fairness in the economy. Roosevelt's progressive vision was rooted in the idea that the government should act as a mediator between business interests, labor, and the public, ensuring that no one group could dominate and exploit others. One of Roosevelt's earliest and most significant contributions to the progressive movement was his trust-busting efforts. As discussed earlier, Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up monopolies and prevent large corporations from gaining too much control over the economy. He believed that unchecked corporate power was detrimental to both workers and consumers, and he sought to level the playing field by promoting competition. Roosevelt's trust-busting initiatives were part of a broader campaign to regulate business practices and curb the excesses of industrial giants. Roosevelt's progressive agenda also focused on improving the lives of workers. He was a strong advocate for labor rights and believed that workers should be protected from exploitation. His administration worked to pass laws that improved working conditions, such as the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, which sought to protect consumers from unsafe products. He also pushed for laws that regulated child labor and ensured safer working environments for factory workers. The issue of workers' rights came to a head during the 1902 coal strike in Pennsylvania, when coal miners went on strike to demand better wages and working conditions. Roosevelt's intervention in the strike was a landmark moment in American labor history. Rather than siding with the business owners, as many previous administrations had done, Roosevelt invited both sides to the White House and helped broker a settlement. This was one of the first times in American history that the government intervened in a labor dispute to ensure that the rights of workers were protected. Roosevelt's actions during the strike earned him praise from labor leaders and workers, and solidified his reputation as a champion of the common man. In addition to his work on labor issues, Roosevelt was also a pioneer in the area of environmental conservation. As part of his progressive agenda, he sought to preserve America's natural resources for future generations. Roosevelt's conservation efforts were motivated by a deep love of nature and a belief that the government had a responsibility to protect the country's wilderness. During his presidency, he created the U.S. Forest Service, established numerous national parks and wildlife refuges, and used the Antiquities Act to create national monuments. Roosevelt's conservation policies were groundbreaking, and they laid the foundation for the modern environmental movement. Roosevelt's approach to the progressive movement was not limited to his domestic policies. He also believed that the United States had a role to play in shaping global events, and he used his foreign policy to promote democracy and stability around the world. His famous phrase, "speak softly and carry a big stick," captured his approach to international diplomacy. Roosevelt believed that the U.S. should act as a force for good in the world, using its military and economic power to protect democracy and promote American values. His role in mediating the Russo-Japanese War, for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and his intervention in the construction of the Panama Canal were examples of his commitment to asserting American influence on the global stage. Roosevelt's progressive vision was also reflected in his support for the expansion of voting rights and his efforts to make the political system more democratic. He supported the direct election of senators, which was eventually achieved through the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, and advocated for women's suffrage, which would be realized with the 19th Amendment in 1920. Roosevelt's commitment to expanding political participation was part of his broader belief in democracy and the importance of giving all citizens a voice in the decisions that affected their lives. The progressive movement during Roosevelt's presidency was not without its critics. Many conservatives viewed Roosevelt's progressive agenda as an overreach of government power, and they feared that his reforms would disrupt the established social and economic order. Some business leaders also resisted Roosevelt's trust-busting policies, arguing that they would harm the economy and hinder business growth. However, Roosevelt remained steadfast in his belief that the government had a responsibility to protect the public from the excesses of big business and to ensure that the benefits of industrialization were shared more equally among all Americans. Despite the opposition, Roosevelt's progressive reforms left a lasting impact on American society. His efforts to regulate business, protect workers, conserve natural resources, and expand political rights helped to lay the groundwork for the New Deal policies of Franklin D. Roosevelt, his distant cousin, and for the broader expansion of government intervention in American life. Roosevelt's legacy as a progressive leader endures to this day, and his vision of an active, interventionist government continues to shape the political discourse in the United States. The progressive movement under Roosevelt was about more than just policies and laws. It was about shifting the nation's mindset toward the idea that government should be a force for positive change. Roosevelt believed that the government had a moral obligation to serve the people and to work for the greater good. His presidency marked a turning point in American politics, and his progressive vision continues to inspire those who seek to make the world a better place for all. Theodore Roosevelt's relationship with the media was one of the most dynamic aspects of his political career. He understood the power of the press and saw it as a tool that could be used both to advance his agenda and to connect with the American people. Throughout his presidency, Roosevelt engaged with journalists and the public in ways that were groundbreaking for the time. He used the media to shape his image, promote his policies, and further his progressive reforms, all while navigating the complex relationship between politicians and the press. From the outset of his presidency, Roosevelt recognized that the media had the power to sway public opinion, influence political discourse, and shape his legacy. He was a master of using the press to his advantage, often feeding journalists information that would help to shape the narrative in his favor. Roosevelt was not a passive figure when it came to the media. He actively sought to engage with reporters and ensure that his policies and ideas received the attention he believed they deserved. Roosevelt's dynamic relationship with the press was evident in his daily interactions with journalists. He made a habit of regularly meeting with reporters and granting them interviews, often in informal settings such as the White House. He was candid and open, allowing the press to gain access to his thoughts and ideas. His willingness to engage with the media was somewhat unconventional for the time, as previous presidents had often been more guarded and formal in their dealings with the press. Roosevelt, however, understood that the media was a direct line to the American people, and he used it to communicate his message clearly and effectively. One of the most significant ways that Roosevelt used the media was through his use of muckrakers, a term he coined to describe investigative journalists who exposed corruption, inequality, and social injustices. While the term was initially used in a pejorative sense, Roosevelt recognized the value of muckraking journalism in drawing attention to the issues that needed to be addressed in society. Journalists like Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair, and Lincoln Steffens were key figures in this movement, and Roosevelt worked with them to bring attention to corporate malfeasance, unsafe working conditions, and political corruption. Roosevelt's relationship with the muckrakers was complex. On one hand, he appreciated their efforts to expose the dark underbelly of American society and to push for reform. On the other hand, he was often critical of their methods, accusing them of exaggerating the problems they uncovered and of focusing too heavily on sensationalism. Despite these tensions, Roosevelt acknowledged that their work had helped to push the nation toward the progressive reforms he championed. His support of the muckrakers, albeit tempered by his criticism of their excesses, showed his belief in the press's role in bringing about social change. Beyond his interactions with muckrakers, Roosevelt also understood the importance of using the media to shape his own public image. He was keenly aware of how he was perceived by the American people and worked tirelessly to cultivate a strong, dynamic persona. Roosevelt was a man of action, and he sought to project that image through his engagement with the press. He was often portrayed as a larger-than-life figure, strong, confident, and unafraid to take on powerful interests. This image was carefully crafted and reinforced by his interactions with journalists, who often wrote about his vigor, his boldness, and his willingness to challenge the status quo. Roosevelt's ability to communicate effectively with the media was also crucial in promoting his progressive reforms. His media savvy allowed him to rally public support for his policies, particularly those related to labor rights, conservation, and corporate regulation. He used the press to build public momentum for his legislative agenda, knowing that if the American people supported his ideas, Congress would be more likely to act. Roosevelt's use of the media to push his reforms was not limited to the domestic press. He also used it to communicate with the world, particularly when it came to foreign policy. His famous big stick diplomacy was often conveyed through speeches and interviews, ensuring that the American public and foreign nations understood his approach to global leadership. One of Roosevelt's most famous media moments came in 1906, when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in mediating the Russo-Japanese War. The press coverage surrounding the event catapulted Roosevelt onto the world stage, reinforcing his image as a leader who was not only a strong domestic reformer, but also an influential figure in global diplomacy. The media hailed him as a hero, and the Nobel Prize served as a symbol of his commitment to peace and diplomacy, even as he maintained a reputation for military strength. Roosevelt's relationship with the press was not without its challenges. He had frequent clashes with journalists, particularly those who disagreed with his policies or questioned his motives. He was known for his fiery temper, and his interactions with reporters could sometimes become heated. Roosevelt was quick to defend himself against what he saw as unfair criticism, and he often took to the press to correct what he considered inaccuracies or misrepresentations. His combative nature and his willingness to publicly spar with the media made him a polarizing figure, but it also added to his larger-than-life image. Despite these occasional conflicts, Roosevelt's relationship with the media was one of mutual benefit. He understood the value of publicity and used it to advance his agenda, while the press recognized that covering Roosevelt was a way to capture the public's attention. His relationship with journalists helped to bring the issues of the day to the forefront of the national conversation, and his ability to communicate with the press ensured that his voice was heard, both at home and abroad. Roosevelt's media strategy was innovative for its time, and it set a precedent for future presidents. His active engagement with the press, his use of the media to promote his policies, and his understanding of the importance of public image all played a role in shaping the presidency in the 20th century. Roosevelt was one of the first presidents to recognize the full potential of the media as a tool for leadership, and his legacy in this regard continues to influence political figures today. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, like much of his legacy, was shaped by his complex and often contradictory views on race and civil rights. While he was a progressive reformer in many areas, his approach to race was more complicated, and he navigated the racial dynamics of his time with a mixture of pragmatism, political calculation, and, at times, conservative thinking. Roosevelt's policies and actions regarding race reflect the broader racial attitudes of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as well as his own personal beliefs about race, power, and social order. Roosevelt's early views on race were shaped by his upbringing and the prevailing racial attitudes of the time. Like many of his contemporaries, Roosevelt saw race through a lens of social hierarchy, with white Americans at the top and African Americans, Native Americans, and other racial groups lower down. Despite this, Roosevelt did not share the same extreme views on racial superiority as some of his political peers. He was not a proponent of the openly discriminatory policies that were widespread in the South, and he was a vocal critic of lynching and racial violence. Nevertheless, his stance on race was often cautious and pragmatic, shaped by political considerations as much as by any deeply held convictions about racial equality. Roosevelt's actions on race during his presidency were marked by significant moments, both positive and controversial. One of the most notable instances of Roosevelt's approach to race was his decision to invite Booker T. Washington, a prominent African-American leader, to the White House in 1901. Washington, the founder of the Tuskegee Institute, was a leading voice in the African-American community and an advocate for vocational education as a means of uplifting African Americans. Roosevelt's invitation to Washington was groundbreaking, as it was the first time an African American had been invited to dine at the White House. The meeting was symbolic of Roosevelt's willingness to engage with African American leaders and acknowledge their contributions to American society. However, Roosevelt's invitation to Washington also sparked controversy, particularly in the South, where racial segregation and white supremacy were entrenched. Many Southern leaders and newspapers condemned Roosevelt for his actions, accusing him of being too lenient on racial issues. Roosevelt, however, defended his decision, arguing that Washington was a man of character and integrity, and that his contributions to American society deserved recognition. Despite the backlash, Roosevelt continued to maintain a cordial relationship with Washington and other African American leaders, though he did not make significant moves to challenge segregation or advance civil rights legislation. Roosevelt's treatment of African Americans was marked by contradictions. While he made efforts to engage with black leaders and took some steps to address issues of racial inequality, his presidency did not fundamentally challenge the racial status quo. His efforts to appoint African Americans to government positions were limited, and he did not push for a federal legislation to end segregation or protect voting rights for African Americans. Roosevelt's reluctance to take bold action on civil rights was a reflection of the political realities of the time, especially the power of Southern Democrats, who held significant influence over Congress and were determined to maintain the system of racial segregation. Roosevelt's views on Native Americans were similarly complicated. Early in his life, he held views that reflected the prevailing stereotypes of Native Americans as primitive and inferior. However, his time spent in the American West, particularly during his years as a rancher in North Dakota, led to a more nuanced understanding of Native American culture and history. He became an advocate for Native American rights and worked to expand their rights on reservations. Despite this, Roosevelt also believed in the concept of civilizing Native Americans, a perspective rooted in the idea that they should adopt European American ways of life in order to succeed in the modern world. Roosevelt's policies toward Native Americans were mixed. While he supported education programs and the protection of Native American lands, he also oversaw the continued expansion of white settlement in the West, often at the expense of Native American sovereignty. His approach to Native American issues reflected his broader belief in American exceptionalism and his belief that the United States had a responsibility to civilize and integrate other races into the fabric of American society. In terms of immigration, Roosevelt's views were influenced by his belief in the importance of assimilation. He supported the idea of the melting pot, where immigrants from various parts of the world could come to the United States, adopt American values, and become part of the national fabric. Roosevelt's approach to immigration was more inclusive than that of many of his contemporaries, but he still held reservations about certain immigrant groups, particularly those from Southern and Eastern Europe. Roosevelt was wary of what he saw as the threat posed by mass immigration to the American way of life, and he advocated for policies that would encourage the assimilation of immigrants into American society. Despite his sometimes conservative views on race and immigration, Roosevelt's presidency marked a period of relative openness in terms of racial discourse, particularly compared to the more overtly racist policies that would come later in the 20th century. While Roosevelt did not challenge the systemic racial inequality that pervaded American society, he did push for some progress, particularly in his dealings with African American leaders and his efforts to ensure that Native American lands were protected. Roosevelt's legacy on race and civil rights is thus marked by a combination of groundbreaking moments and missed opportunities. While he made some notable gestures, such as inviting Booker T. Washington to the White House and supporting certain policies that benefited Native Americans, his presidency did not lead to substantial change in the areas of racial equality or civil rights. His views on race were shaped by the political reality of his time and were often constrained by the limitations of his office and the broader social and political context. In the years following Roosevelt's presidency, many of the racial and civil rights issues he had avoided would come to a head, culminating in the civil rights movement of the 20th century. While Roosevelt's actions were a step forward compared to many of his contemporaries, his legacy on race remains a complex and controversial aspect of his broader legacy as a progressive reformer and national leader. The legacy of Theodore Roosevelt continues to shape not only American politics but also the global landscape. His presidency, marked by bold reform and assertive leadership, left an indelible imprint on the 20th century and beyond. Roosevelt's influence can still be felt today in areas as diverse as environmental policy, foreign diplomacy, progressive political thought, and the role of the United States in global affairs. Understanding the lasting impact of his time in office requires examining how his vision continues to resonate in the modern world. One of the most enduring aspects of Roosevelt's legacy is his commitment to conservation. As the 26th president, Roosevelt took significant steps to protect the country's natural resources, creating national parks, wildlife refuges, and forests that would serve as a lasting testament to his belief in the importance of preserving the environment for future generations. His efforts were instrumental in shaping the modern conservation movement, which remains a central issue in American politics today. Roosevelt's creation of the U.S. Forest Service and his use of the Antiquities Act to designate national monuments paved the way for the National Park Service, an agency that continues to manage millions of acres of protected land. Today, Roosevelt's environmental policies are reflected in ongoing efforts to combat climate change, protect biodiversity, and promote sustainable development. His vision of a balanced relationship between progress and preservation remains relevant as the world grapples with the challenges of environmental degradation and climate instability. Roosevelt's legacy lives on in the work of organizations and individuals dedicated to protecting natural landscapes and promoting responsible stewardship of the planet's resources. In addition to his contributions to conservation, Roosevelt's progressive reforms have left a lasting mark on American society. His efforts to regulate business practices, protect workers, and expand civil rights laid the groundwork for the New Deal policies of Franklin D. Roosevelt, his distant cousin. The Roosevelt family's influence on progressive politics extended into the 20th century, as later leaders built upon the reforms initiated by Theodore Roosevelt. Today, many of the core tenets of Roosevelt's progressivism, such as government regulation of business, social welfare programs, and environmental protections, remain central to the political debate in the United States. Roosevelt's approach to government was rooted in the belief that the state should serve as an active force for social and economic justice. His emphasis on using the power of the presidency to challenge monopolistic corporations and protect the welfare of ordinary citizens continues to inspire policymakers and activists advocating for reform. While modern political movements may differ in their methods and goals, Roosevelt's vision of a government that works for the people remains a powerful ideal in contemporary political discourse. Roosevelt's foreign policy also left a profound and lasting legacy. His belief in American exceptionalism and his willingness to assert U.S. power on the global stage reshaped the nation's role in international affairs. Roosevelt's interventions in Latin America, his role in mediating the Russo-Japanese War, and his efforts to expand American influence through the construction of the Panama Canal all helped to establish the United States as a global superpower. Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy, which emphasized the use of military power to back diplomatic negotiations, laid the foundation for the expansion of U.S. influence in the 20th century. Today, the United States remains a dominant force in international politics, with Roosevelt's vision of a strong, active foreign policy continuing to shape the country's approach to global challenges. Roosevelt's belief in the importance of diplomacy, coupled with the use of military strength to secure American interests, echoes in the policies of modern presidents, particularly in relation to military interventions, foreign aid, and international trade agreements. Roosevelt's foreign policy was not without controversy, particularly his interventions in Latin America. His use of the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which justified U.S. intervention in the Western Hemisphere to maintain stability, set the stage for future American involvement in the region. Today, the United States continues to grapple with the consequences of its interventions in Latin America and other parts of the world. Roosevelt's policies have sparked ongoing debates about the ethics of intervention and the role of the U.S. in promoting democracy and stability abroad. In the realm of politics, Roosevelt's legacy has had a lasting impact on the nature of presidential leadership. He was one of the first presidents to use the media as a tool to communicate directly with the American public. His skillful use of the press allowed him to shape his image, promote his policies, and mobilize public support for his reforms. Roosevelt's bully pulpit approach to leadership, in which the president uses the office to advocate for his agenda, has become a central feature of modern presidential politics. Today's presidents continue to rely on the media to shape public opinion and push their policies forward. Roosevelt's ability to galvanize the public and push through significant reforms also influenced the way future presidents approach their own political agendas. His presidency set a precedent for executive leadership, demonstrating that a president could use the power of the office to enact sweeping changes and address the pressing issues of the time. Roosevelt's assertiveness, energy, and willingness to tackle difficult problems set the standard for presidential leadership in the 20th century. The Roosevelt legacy extends beyond politics, conservation, and foreign policy. He also reshaped the American character, becoming an enduring symbol of strength, determination, and optimism. His emphasis on the strenuous life and his belief in the importance of physical fitness, personal responsibility, and individual action resonate today, particularly in the realms of health, education, and leadership. Roosevelt's life continues to inspire those who seek to overcome obstacles, embrace challenges, and make a difference in the world. The legacy of Theodore Roosevelt is complex, multifaceted, and ever-evolving. His contributions to American society and the world remain a source of inspiration, debate, and reflection. As a reformer, leader, and visionary, Roosevelt reshaped the United States in ways that continue to affect the nation's political, social, and environmental landscape. His influence will undoubtedly continue to be felt in the years to come, as the country and the world grapple with the issues he confronted during his presidency. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency was a turning point in American history, and his influence on future presidents is undeniable. His unique approach to leadership, progressive reforms, and vision for the country set the stage for the direction of American politics in the 20th century. Roosevelt's impact can be seen in the policies, actions, and leadership styles of subsequent presidents who sought to build upon or respond to the legacy he left behind. One of the most direct ways Roosevelt's influence was felt was through his distant cousin, Franklin D. Roosevelt. As president from 1933 to 1945, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, was deeply inspired by Theodore's progressive vision and his emphasis on using the government to address the needs of ordinary Americans. FDR's New Deal policies, which aimed to combat the Great Depression, echoed Theodore Roosevelt's earlier progressive reforms, particularly in areas like labor rights, regulation of business, and social welfare. While FDR's policies were more expansive in scope, especially with the creation of Social Security and the establishment of a more robust welfare state, the foundation for these reforms was laid by Theodore Roosevelt's work in the early 20th century. In addition to his cousin, Roosevelt's influence extended to other presidents, particularly those who were tasked with navigating the complexities of industrialization, global conflict, and economic disparity. Presidents such as Woodrow Wilson, Harris Truman, and even Lyndon B. Johnson drew on Roosevelt's model of active leadership, which combined a strong executive role with a commitment to social progress. Roosevelt's assertiveness in foreign policy and his belief in American exceptionalism also influenced US presidents as they navigated the country's growing role on the world stage. Roosevelt's belief in the bully pulpit, the idea that the presidency could be used as a platform to rally the public behind a policy agenda, was another key aspect of his influence on future presidents. His effective use of the media and his direct communication with the American people set a precedent for modern presidential campaigns and governance. Roosevelt's ability to dominate public discourse using the press to support his progressive policies, was a model that would be followed by future presidents who sought to shape public opinion and garner support for their agendas. In particular, Franklin D. Roosevelt took up Theodore's mantle of using the executive office to drive major policy reforms. FDR's fireside chats, in which he spoke directly to the American people over the radio, were a direct extension of Theodore Roosevelt's public engagement with the media. Roosevelt had recognized the power of communication in the modern age, and his use of the media was revolutionary at the time. By speaking directly to the people, Roosevelt established a precedent for future leaders to connect with the public in ways that were not possible before. In terms of foreign policy, Roosevelt's vision of a powerful America on the global stage had lasting consequences. His interventionist stance, exemplified by the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, became a guiding principle for American foreign policy in the 20th century. Roosevelt's emphasis on American leadership in international affairs, coupled with his belief in using military power to assert U.S. interests, influenced future presidents as they navigated global conflicts, including World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. Roosevelt's aggressive foreign policy approach also laid the foundation for the United States' involvement in international diplomacy and military intervention. Presidents like Harry Truman, who made the decision to use atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II, and John F. Kennedy, whose administration dealt with the Cuban Missile Crisis, were influenced by Roosevelt's example of using American power to shape the world order. His belief in the importance of a strong military and American global leadership was echoed in U.S. foreign policy throughout the 20th century. Domestically, Roosevelt's progressive reform served as a model for future presidents, who sought to address the growing inequality of wealth and the concentration of corporate power. The legacy of Roosevelt's trust-busting initiatives, his push for labor reforms, and his efforts to regulate business practices can be seen in the policies of later presidents, including FDR and Lyndon B. Johnson. Johnson's Great Society initiatives, which aimed to eliminate poverty and racial injustice, built upon the groundwork laid by Roosevelt's reforms in the early 20th century. Even in the late 20th and 21st centuries, Roosevelt's ideas continue to influence the political discourse. His belief in the power of government to create positive change and protect the interests of ordinary Americans has been a guiding principle for many political leaders. His emphasis on the role of the president as an active, dynamic force for progress continues to shape how the American public views the presidency. Roosevelt's progressive legacy has been championed by politicians on both the left and the right. Though interpretations of his legacy may differ depending on political perspectives, Theodore Roosevelt's influence can also be seen in the modern conversation about environmental policy. His commitment to conservation and his creation of the national park system paved the way for future environmental movements. In the 1960s and 1970s, when environmental concerns gained national prominence, Roosevelt's work was revisited as a precursor to the modern environmental movement. His preservation of natural lands and his foresight in protecting America's wilderness for future generations provided a foundation for the environmental policies that followed, including the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the passage of key environmental laws. Roosevelt's emphasis on physical fitness and the strenuous life also resonated in later years. His belief that Americans should embrace physical challenges and live active lives helped to inspire the fitness movement of the 20th century. His own devotion to physical activity despite his childhood health challenges served as an inspiration for generations to take responsibility for their health and well-being. Roosevelt's legacy was not without its flaws, especially in regard to his views on race and his sometimes paternalistic approach to Native Americans and immigrants. However, his leadership and reforms, particularly in the areas of conservation, progressive political change, and global diplomacy, left an indelible mark on American history. His ability to push for change, challenge the status quo, and lead the country through times of rapid transformation ensured that his influence would continue to be felt for generations to come. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency and his lasting impact on American culture and politics are not limited to the reforms and actions he championed during his time in office. His ideas, values, and vision for the nation continue to influence the American ideal of leadership, character, and the role of government in society. Roosevelt's influence on American ideals is evident in the way he reshaped the nation's understanding of what it means to be an engaged citizen, a determined leader, and a responsible steward of the environment. At the heart of Roosevelt's influence was his belief in the power of the individual. He believed that Americans should embrace a life of action, responsibility, and moral strength. His personal philosophy, which he referred to as the strenuous life, emphasized the importance of hard work, physical fitness, and a strong sense of duty. Roosevelt believed that an individual's success or failure in life depended not on their circumstances, but on their character and willingness to persevere in the face of adversity. Roosevelt's emphasis on personal responsibility and physical vigor became a central part of the American ideal. His own transformation from a sickly asthmatic child to a robust, energetic leader exemplified the power of self-discipline and the pursuit of strength. He believed that the American people, as individuals and as a nation, had a duty to live up to their highest potential, and he encouraged citizens to take an active role in shaping their lives and the future of the country. This vision of an engaged, proactive citizenry continues to influence American cultural ideals today, with a focus on personal responsibility, self-improvement, and contributing to the greater good. In addition to promoting individual strength, Roosevelt also believed in the importance of civic duty. He saw the government as a force for good, capable of making a positive difference in the lives of the ordinary people. His progressive reforms were grounded in the idea that government should serve the public interest, not the interests of a select few. Roosevelt's vision of an active, interventionist government shaped the American understanding of the role of the state in addressing social and economic issues. He rejected the notion that the government should simply stay out of the way and allow the free market to operate without constraint. Instead, Roosevelt believed that government had a responsibility to regulate business, protect workers, and ensure fairness in the economy. Roosevelt's views on the role of government and the public's role in the political process helped to redefine the American ideal of democracy. He championed the idea that democracy was not simply about voting, but about active participation in civic life. Roosevelt believed that citizens should take responsibility for the direction of their country, whether through voting, volunteering, or working to improve their communities. His efforts to expand voting rights, improve labor conditions, and promote social welfare were grounded in the belief that democracy required more than just the right to vote. It required an engaged and informed citizenry. Roosevelt's commitment to social justice and his belief in the power of government to effect positive change also left an enduring mark on American ideals. While his progressive policies were often met with resistance, particularly from business interests and conservative factions, Roosevelt's willingness to take on powerful forces in order to protect the public interest helped to shape the moral framework of modern American politics. He argued that the government had a duty to ensure that all Americans had access to the opportunities and resources they needed to succeed, and that the wealthy and powerful should not be allowed to exploit the system for their own gain. This vision of a fair and just society continues to influence the American political landscape today. Roosevelt's environmental policies also contributed to his lasting influence on American ideals. His belief in the importance of preserving natural resources for future generations helped to shape the nation's understanding of conservation and environmental stewardship. Roosevelt's efforts to create national parks, forests, and wildlife refuges were driven by his belief that the natural world was not just a resource to be exploited, but a national treasure to be protected. His work laid the foundation for the modern environmental movement, which continues to emphasize the importance of sustainability, conservation, and the responsible use of natural resources. Roosevelt's views on American exceptionalism and the country's role in the world also played a significant role in shaping the national ideal. He believed that the United States had a unique mission to spread democracy and protect freedom around the globe. Roosevelt's foreign policy, particularly his interventions in Latin America and his role in brokering peace during the Russo-Japanese War, reflected his belief in the importance of American leadership in global affairs. His view of the United States as a global force for good became a defining feature of American foreign policy in the 20th century, and remains a central theme in the country's role in the world today. Roosevelt's legacy, then, is not just found in his policies or his accomplishments, but in the ideals he embodied and promoted. His belief in the power of the individual, the importance of civic duty, the need for government to serve the public good, and the responsibility of Americans to protect the natural world continues to resonate with people around the world. Roosevelt's vision of a dynamic, engaged, and responsible society has become a foundational part of the American ethos. As the years passed after his presidency, Roosevelt's influence on American ideals only grew. His life and legacy continue to inspire leaders, activists, and citizens who seek to build a more just, equitable, and vibrant society. Roosevelt's ideals are reflected in the work of those who fight for social justice, environmental protection, and a more democratic and fair political system. His vision of an engaged, self-reliant citizenry, committed to both personal and collective progress, remains a touchstone for American values. Theodore Roosevelt's character was as dynamic and multifaceted as his political career. His personal philosophy, shaped by his early experiences, academic interests, and love of adventure, made him one of the most distinctive figures in American history. Roosevelt's approach to life was grounded in his belief that individuals should live boldly, pursue greatness, and contribute to the greater good. His own life embodied these ideals, as he continually sought to challenge himself, overcome adversity, and shape the world around him. At the heart of Roosevelt's personal philosophy was his belief in the strenuous life. As a child, Roosevelt had been frail and sickly, suffering from asthma and other health issues. Despite his physical limitations, he refused to accept a life of weakness. He made it his mission to build both his body and character through hard work, discipline, and perseverance. His physical transformation from a sickly child to a robust and energetic man became one of the defining aspects of his life. Roosevelt believed that the pursuit of strength, both physical and moral, was essential for personal success and fulfillment. Roosevelt's commitment to the strenuous life was not limited to physical fitness. He saw the challenges of life as opportunities for growth, and he faced every obstacle with a determined, can-do attitude. Whether it was overcoming the physical challenges of his youth, pushing through the pressures of his political career, or confronting the personal tragedy of losing his first wife, Roosevelt approached life with an unwavering sense of purpose. His belief that one must meet life's difficulties head-on and embrace adversity as a means of strengthening character became a central tenet of his philosophy. This idea of the strenuous life extended beyond personal development to encompass Roosevelt's approach to leadership. He believed that leaders should lead by example, exhibiting strength, courage, and moral clarity in the face of challenges. Roosevelt's leadership was defined by his willingness to take bold action, challenge entrenched interests, and pursue reform, even when it was unpopular. He saw himself as a steward of the public good, responsible for using his position to improve the lives of others, even if it meant confronting powerful forces in society. Another central aspect of Roosevelt's philosophy was his belief in the importance of duty. He saw life as a moral obligation to serve the greater good, and he placed a high value on fulfilling one's responsibilities, whether as a leader, a husband, a father, or a citizen. Roosevelt's sense of duty was not limited to his role as president. It extended to all areas of his life. He believed that everyone had a responsibility to contribute to society, and he often spoke about the importance of individual effort in achieving collective progress. His personal code of duty was rooted in his understanding of America's place in the world, and his belief that the United States had a unique role to play in advancing democracy, justice, and freedom. Roosevelt's character was also defined by his strong sense of morality and justice. He was deeply concerned with issues of fairness and believed in the importance of fighting for the rights of the underprivileged. He viewed social and economic inequality as a moral failing and sought to use the power of government to correct these imbalances. His trust-busting efforts, support for labor rights, and commitment to progressive reforms were all rooted in his belief that a just society required equal opportunity for all. Roosevelt's sense of moral purpose made him a champion of causes that were not always popular, but which he believed were necessary for the greater good. Roosevelt's adventurous spirit and love of exploration were also integral to his personal philosophy. He was not content to simply be a politician or a statesman. He sought out challenges that would test his limits and expand his understanding of the world, whether it was his time as a rancher in the Badlands, his extensive travels in Africa, or his explorations in the Amazon rainforest later in life. Roosevelt's passion for adventure was a reflection of his belief in the value of experience and the need to embrace life's uncertainties. He saw exploration as a way to grow both personally and intellectually, and he encouraged others to pursue their own adventures and challenges, no matter how daunting they might seem. One of the key elements of Roosevelt's character was his belief in the value of self-reliance and independence. He saw the individual as the cornerstone of American society, and he believed that personal achievement was the result of hard work, determination, and a willingness to take responsibility for one's own life. This belief in self-reliance was tied to Roosevelt's broader vision of American society, which he saw as a land of opportunity where individuals could rise to greatness based on their abilities and character, rather than their social class or background. Roosevelt's personal life was a reflection of this ideal, as he constantly pushed himself to achieve more, to explore new horizons, and to make a difference in the world. Roosevelt's philosophy was also shaped by his views on democracy and government. He believed that the United States was a land of extraordinary promise, but he also saw that the country faced significant challenges. He believed that government had a responsibility to serve the people, protect their rights, and create the conditions for fairness and opportunity. Roosevelt viewed democracy as a dynamic force, one that required active participation from all citizens, not just the political elite. He sought to involve the American people in the process of governance, encouraging them to take ownership of the country's future through reforms and collective action. Roosevelt's personal philosophy was also influenced by his intellectual curiosity and his lifelong love of learning. He was a voracious reader, and his intellectual interests ranged from history and literature to science and philosophy. His wide-ranging interests helped shape his understanding of the world and informed his approach to both domestic and foreign policy. Roosevelt's ability to synthesize information from diverse fields, along with his eagerness to engage with new ideas, made him one of the most intellectually versatile presidents in American history. In conclusion, Theodore Roosevelt's personal philosophy and character were defined by his commitment to strength, duty, morality, adventure, and self-reliance. He believed that individuals should strive to live lives of purpose and to contribute to the greater good, and he approached his presidency with the same vigor and determination that defined his personal life. Roosevelt's character, shaped by his experiences and ideals, continues to serve as a model of leadership and resilience, inspiring generations to pursue lives of action, responsibility, and service. Theodore Roosevelt's popularity has endured long after his time in office, and his legacy continues to resonate with Americans and people around the world. His dynamic leadership style, commitment to reform, and larger-than-life persona have ensured that Roosevelt remains a revered figure in American history. His influence is seen in the ongoing admiration for his progressive ideals, his bold foreign policy, and his unwavering belief in American exceptionalism. Even decades after his presidency, Roosevelt's popularity shows no signs of waning, as his legacy continues to shape public life, politics, and national identity. One reason for Roosevelt's enduring popularity is his ability to connect with the American people. Throughout his presidency, Roosevelt was a man of action, constantly engaging with the public through speeches, letters, and personal interactions. He understood the power of the press and used it to communicate directly with the people, building a strong rapport with citizens from all walks of life. Roosevelt's image as a champion of the common man was solidified by his efforts to break up monopolies, improve labor conditions, and promote environmental conservation. His progressive policies resonated with many Americans who saw him as a leader willing to take on powerful interests to ensure fairness and justice. Roosevelt's larger-than-life personality also contributed to his enduring popularity. He was a man of great vigor, who lived life to the fullest, and his energy and enthusiasm were infectious. His adventurous spirit, whether in his love for outdoor exploration, his service in the Spanish-American War, or his willingness to engage in the challenges of governing, made him a figure of inspiration. Americans admired his zest for life and his refusal to be constrained by the ordinary limits of politics or personal circumstance. His own triumph over childhood illness, combined with his later accomplishments, made Roosevelt a symbol of perseverance, determination, and success against the odds. Roosevelt's impact on the American psyche extends beyond his time in office. His commitment to progressivism, his faith in the power of government to effect positive change, and his willingness to challenge the political establishment resonate with those who continue to advocate for reform and social justice. Roosevelt's progressive policies, which sought to regulate business, protect workers, and preserve the environment, have been embraced by subsequent generations of reformers who've drawn on his vision of a more just and equitable society. His approach to government, which emphasized the active role of the president and the need for leadership in times of change, continues to influence how the public views the presidency. Beyond domestic politics, Roosevelt's foreign policy also continues to shape his legacy. His belief in American exceptionalism and his assertive stance in world affairs made the United States a more active player on the global stage. Roosevelt's interventionist policies, particularly in Latin America and the construction of the Panama Canal, reshaped the country's role in the world. His legacy of global leadership can still be seen in America's engagement with international diplomacy, peacekeeping, and military power. Roosevelt's approach to foreign relations, coupled with his maxim of "speak softly and carry a big stick," remains a guiding principle in U.S. foreign policy. In addition to his influence on politics and foreign affairs, Roosevelt's conservation efforts have become an integral part of his legacy. His work to establish national parks, forests, and wildlife refuges has preserved America's natural beauty for generations, and his commitment to conservation laid the groundwork for the modern environmental movement, the creation of the U.S. Forest Service and his use of the Antiquities Act to protect national monuments reflect his deep belief in the importance of safeguarding the environment. Today, Roosevelt's conservation policies continue to inspire efforts to preserve and protect the planet's natural resources, as well as to address issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, and sustainability. Roosevelt's popularity is also linked to the image of American strength and vitality that he embodied. He represented a vision of the United States as a powerful, dynamic nation, capable of overcoming challenges and asserting itself on the world stage. Roosevelt's image as a strong, decisive leader who could both inspire the American people and engage in diplomacy with world leaders helped to shape the nation's identity as a global superpower. His emphasis on physical fitness, leadership, and self-reliance continues to resonate with Americans who value personal responsibility and a strong national character. Roosevelt's popularity is also enhanced by the many aspects of his character that continue to be admired. His bravery, tenacity, and sense of adventure have made him a figure that embodies the spirit of American exceptionalism. He believed in the ability of individuals and the nation as a whole to rise above adversity and take on challenges, whether through military action, political reform, or personal growth. Roosevelt's vision of the strenuous life, in which individuals are called upon to face challenges with determination and strength, continues to inspire those who seek to live a life of purpose and achievement. Even decades after his death, Roosevelt's memory is celebrated in various ways. Statues and monuments dedicated to him can be found across the United States, and his legacy is honored through educational programs, documentaries, books, and films. Roosevelt's family, including his children and grandchildren, have continued to advocate for the values he championed during his presidency, ensuring that his impact on American society is never forgotten. Roosevelt's name remains synonymous with bold leadership, progressive ideals, and the enduring belief in the power of government to effect positive change. As the nation continues to grapple with modern challenges, Roosevelt's legacy provides a model for those seeking to make a difference in the world. His approach to leadership, his commitment to progressivism, and his belief in the strength of both the individual and the nation offer valuable lessons for today's policymakers, activists, and citizens. Roosevelt's enduring popularity is a testament to the lasting relevance of his ideas and his profound influence on the course of American history. As we conclude this journey through the life and legacy of Theodore Roosevelt, it is clear that his impact on the United States and the world is profound and enduring. Roosevelt's presidency marked a critical turning point in American history, as he redefined the role of the federal government, reshaped the nation's foreign policy, and pushed forward progressive reforms that continue to influence the political landscape to this day. Roosevelt's life was characterized by an unwavering belief in the power of individuals and governments to create positive change. Whether in the domestic realm, where he championed labor rights, corporate regulation, and environmental conservation, or on the world stage, where he expanded America's influence through diplomacy and military intervention, Roosevelt embodied the ideals of strength, action, and moral duty. His strenuous life philosophy, which emphasized the importance of hard work, perseverance, and personal responsibility, left a lasting mark on American culture and continues to inspire individuals to live with purpose and engage in the world around them. One of Roosevelt's most enduring legacies is his role as a progressive reformer. His belief in government intervention to address inequality, protect the environment, and promote social welfare laid the groundwork for the progressive movements of the 20th century, including the New Deal and the Civil Rights Movement. While his approach to race and civil rights was complex and at times contradictory, his commitment to creating a fairer, more just society was unwavering. Roosevelt's actions in breaking up monopolies, regulating business practices, and creating national parks and monuments set the stage for future reforms aimed at improving the lives of ordinary Americans. Roosevelt's foreign policy also left a lasting legacy. His vision of American exceptionalism and his belief in the United States' role as a global power reshaped the nation's place in the world. His interventions in Latin America, the construction of the Panama Canal, and his mediation of the Russo-Japanese War all contributed to the United States' rise as a global superpower. Roosevelt's approach to foreign diplomacy, encapsulated in his famous phrase, "speak softly and carry a big stick," continues to influence American foreign policy and the country's leadership role in global affairs. At the same time, Roosevelt's commitment to environmental conservation has had a profound and lasting effect. His efforts to protect America's natural resources through the creation of national parks, forests, and wildlife refuges laid the foundation for the modern environmental movement. Roosevelt's belief that the nation's wilderness should be preserved for future generations is reflected in the ongoing work of conservationists, policymakers, and citizens who continue to fight for the protection of the planet's natural beauty. Theodore Roosevelt's personal character, his vigor, his belief in moral duty, and his determination to live life fully, remains a source of inspiration for many. His legacy is not only one of political achievement, but also of a life lived with courage, purpose, and a deep commitment to improving the world. Roosevelt's approach to leadership, his willingness to confront adversity, and his ability to inspire others to take action are qualities that continue to define what it means to be an American leader. As we reflect on Roosevelt's life and legacy, we're reminded of the power of leadership to bring about change and the responsibility that each of us has to contribute to the common good. Roosevelt's example challenges us to embrace the strenuous life, to take on challenges with determination, and to never settle for the status quo when progress is possible. His story is a testament to the idea that individuals can shape the world around them, and that through hard work, dedication, and a commitment to justice, we can build a better future for all. The legacy of Theodore Roosevelt is one that transcends time and continues to resonate with Americans and people around the world. His life reminds us that true leadership is about more than holding power. It is about using that power to serve others, to protect the weak, and to promote the ideals of fairness, justice, and opportunity for all. Roosevelt's life and presidency are a reminder that the pursuit of progress is never easy, but it is always worth striving for, and that one individual can make a profound difference in shaping the course of history. As we reach the end of this exploration into the life and legacy of Theodore Roosevelt, we reflect on the remarkable journey of a man who shaped the United States and the world through his leadership, vision, and unyielding belief in the power of action. From his early struggles with health to his dynamic presidency, Roosevelt's life is a testament to perseverance, courage, and the relentless pursuit of progress. His contributions to the progressive movement, foreign policy, conservation, and domestic reforms have left an indelible mark on American society and the world. Though his presidency ended over a century ago, the ideals he championed, strength, fairness, environmental stewardship, and social justice, continue to resonate with us today. Roosevelt's example of leadership, determination, and a life lived with purpose continues to inspire those who seek to make a positive difference in the world. Thank you for joining this journey through the history of Theodore Roosevelt. His story, marked by both triumph and struggle, reminds us that leadership is not just about power, but about using that power to serve others and advance the common good. His legacy lives on in the policies he championed, the institutions he helped create, and the ideals he inspired. May we all be guided by the lessons of his life as we navigate the challenges of our own time. And with that, we close the chapter on Theodore Roosevelt's extraordinary life and enduring influence.